Hey guys, tonight we're taking you somewhere you definitely don't want to be. Deep in the muck of World War I trenches, you're going to live the full experience of a trench soldier, from soggy boots to the constant threat of random death from above. So yeah, you probably won't survive this, but you'll feel every second of it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I don't need fake followers, just real ones who want to walk through the past with muddy socks and heavy helmets. Oh, and where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city and your time in the comments below. And now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in northern France to the smell of damp hay, distant gunfire, and the sharp metallic scent of war. You step down from the transport truck, a canvas-covered beast rattling with grime and engine heat, your backpack twice as heavy as it was when you left Dover. Your boots sink instantly into ankle-deep mud, cold, sticky, and somehow alive with movement. The sergeant points with his whistle toward a narrow path bordered with barbed wire and sandbags. "Your new home," he grunts, already lighting a cigarette with numb fingers. Home, right. The trench is not so much dug as clawed out of the earth, with wooden planks nailed together like a haphazard coffin. Water sloshes between your feet with every step, soaking into your socks, your bones, your sense of optimism. The mud isn't just brown, it's grey, oily, speckled with straw and something that looks suspiciously like blood. Overhead, the sky is a pale smear of smoke. Somewhere, shells drop in slow rhythmic thuds like the heartbeat of the front line. You climb down the trench ladder, using your hands for balance, though you wish you hadn't. Your fingers now coated in something you can't identify. The air is thick, cloying with the stench of rotting food, unwashed bodies, and something far worse. Death doesn't have a single smell. It has a portfolio, and you've just inhaled it all. To your left, a private coughs into a rag and mutters, "Welcome to paradise." You try to smile but can't muster it. A rat the size of a football scurries along a support beam, dragging something shiny in its teeth. You try not to think about what it might be. Someone nearby is playing a harmonica, not well, but with enthusiasm. It doesn't sound like a song so much as a scream with rhythm. Your section of the trench is technically called a fire bay, one of many zigzagging compartments designed to break up the impact of shell blasts. It's lined with corrugated iron and sandbags stacked shoulder high. You get shown a dugout, your temporary bedroom, which is just a hole barely big enough for 2 men and 1 terrible night's sleep. There's a candle stub stuck in an empty sardine tin nailed to the wall, an attempt at ambience that fails dramatically. They give you a shovel. It's dented, the wooden handle wrapped in twine. "Get digging. Fresh meat," someone says. You dig because you don't know what else to do and you're already wet anyway. Your task is to deepen a drainage channel, though calling it that is generous. It's just another place for the water to sit and think about how best to ruin your feet. As you dig, you get your first real lesson. The trench is a living thing. It shifts with the rain, groans under the weight of men and ammo, and sucks at your legs like it wants to pull you under. It never dries, it never rests, and you're just one more parasite trying to survive inside it. By the afternoon, your fingernails are black, your shoulders ache, and you've learned 2 things. Never trust a dry patch of ground, and always hang your socks when you sleep. You think it's over, that maybe you'll get to rest, but no, night is when the rats come out bold and the enemy lobs gas shells just to mess with your nerves. The real kicker is how quickly this feels normal. By your 3rd hour, the trench doesn't seem horrifying, it seems permanent. The distant shelling becomes a lullaby, and the damp becomes a second skin. You look up and notice the barbed wire at the top of the trench has little strips of cloth clinging to it. Some are red. You don't ask. You don't want to know. Historically, this trench you're in, somewhere near Ypres, would have been one of thousands along a front that stretched more than 400 miles. Engineers and infantry dug them by hand, foot by foot, often under enemy fire, often with frozen fingers or dysentery gnawing at their guts. They were supposed to be temporary, just a defensive measure until someone came up with a better plan. No one did. So the trenches stayed, and rotted, and consumed. Fringe fact for the night: some trenches were so close to the enemy, less than 100 feet apart, you could hear them snoring. That's right. If you couldn't kill them, you could at least learn their sleep schedule. At times, soldiers even traded tobacco and jam by tossing tins over the parapet. The war was bizarre like that, equal parts nightmare and strange, absurd civility. But not everything has a clean explanation. One of the enduring debates about life in the trenches is just how effective these dug-in lines really were. Some historians argue they prolonged the war unnecessarily, turning it into a static grind. Others claim they saved lives compared to open field battles. Still others say it didn't matter, because in the end it was just mud, blood and waiting. As night falls, you huddle in your dugout with a few strangers who are suddenly your whole world. One of them offers you a cigarette. You take it, even though you don't smoke. Smoke helps cover the stench. Another guy passes around a tattered deck of cards. No one mentions the shelling. No one mentions the cold. You all know, you all feel it. Tomorrow you'll dig more. You might get shot at, you might lose a toe. But tonight you're alive. In the trench, that's enough. Before you find any rhythm in this grim, muddy underworld, you rewind, back to where it all began. To a time when your boots were still clean, your teeth weren't chattering from cold and terror, and war sounded like glory. Remember the posters? They were everywhere. Bold letters, brave men in uniform, Union Jacks fluttering behind them. Your mother didn't want you to go, your mates did, and so did every street corner, pub wall and newspaper in the country. Your king and country need you. You actually believed it. You looked at those posters and thought, yeah, that'll be me. Bayonet raised, girls waiting when I get home. At the recruiting office, the line stretched down the block. Boys who looked like they hadn't yet shaved, and old men walking a little straighter, puffing out their chests, trying to lie their way past the age limit. You were 18. Barely. You told them you were 19, just older like everyone else. The clerk barely looked up from his paper. A nod, a stamp, a handshake that felt like ceremony. You were in, just like that. They handed you a little paper badge. You tucked it into your pocket like it was treasure. Walked home like you'd just been knighted. Your mother cried in the kitchen. Your father didn't say anything, just nodded. He'd seen a different war. Not this one. Not yet. But he knew. You ignored that look in his eyes. Basic training was a blur of mud, early mornings, and shouting. You weren't great at marching, but you were quick with a rifle and better with a joke. That got you through. You learned how to clean a bayonet until it gleamed. How to lace your boots the regulation way. How to fold your kit so tight it could bounce a penny. Your mates teased you when you got your helmet on backwards the first time. You made fun of them when they all failed the gas mask drill. It was a fair trade. At night, you shared stories about what you'd do with the pay. 10 shillings a week felt like a fortune. You told them about a girl back home, though the truth was fuzzier than the fiction. It didn't matter. Everyone had someone waiting, or said they did. And then came the speeches. The officers with their polished boots and waxed moustaches, pacing in front of you on muddy training grounds, explaining that this war would be quick. Over by Christmas. You all laughed. It was September. How bad could it be? Just a few weeks of discomfort. An adventure. You'd return heroes, parade through London, maybe get a medal pinned on your chest. No one told you about the lice or the smell, or the fact that a single letter from home could hit harder than any shell. Then came the medical exam, stripped down, poked and prodded. Some were turned away for flat feet or bad lungs. You made it through. You felt lucky, like you'd won something. And then, issue day. Uniforms stacked like sandbags. You were handed your khaki kit, heavy boots, a belt that didn't fit, a rifle that did. You fumbled with your webbing, tried to make some sense of it all. You laughed at your reflection in the scratched mirror, looking like a boy in his dad's coat. But inside your heart was thumping. You looked official, real, ready. Fringe fact for you? During the early months of the war, Britain ran out of uniforms. That's how many men signed up. Some recruits drilled in civilian clothes with makeshift wooden rifles. Others were issued blue uniforms, nicknamed Kitchener's Blues, until the standard khaki was available. So much for that crisp, professional image. Finally you boarded a train, steam hissing, whistle shrieking, crowds waving on the platform. You couldn't hear them over the engine's roar, but it didn't matter. You waved back. Someone tossed an apple. Someone else shouted, "Bring back a Kaiser's helmet." And off you went. At this point, historians often argue about the motivations of early volunteers. Was it patriotism, peer pressure, a hunger for adventure? The truth lies somewhere in the middle. For many it was simple. Everyone else was going. To stay behind was unthinkable. To be left out meant shame. You didn't want to be the one in the pub who hadn't done his bit. So you joined, not really knowing what your bit would cost. That night, curled in a third-class train carriage, you watched the green countryside blur past. Sheep in fields, smoke curling from chimneys. You tried to picture France, and you tried to imagine what trench warfare even looked like. Someone passed around a bottle of something sharp and homemade. It burned going down. You laughed too loudly. You were nervous and didn't want to show it. And then a strange quiet fell. Each man slumped in his seat, dozing off, dreaming maybe of glory, maybe of something else. The carriage smelled of oil, wool, and fear. And by morning you'd be in the coastal town of Folkestone waiting to cross the channel. And the next time you touched solid ground, it wouldn't be England anymore. It would be the edge of a different world. Back then, none of you could guess how long this war would last. How long you'd be gone. Some said a few months. One bloke guessed a year, and everyone laughed. You look back now from the trench and realise none of you knew a damn thing. It wasn't glory, it wasn't a grand cause. It was mud, rats, and boredom interrupted by horror. But you didn't know that yet. You still had clean boots. You still believed the posters. You'd learn soon enough. The sea crossing is cold and jittery, full of false bravado and stomachs that turn the moment the boat lurches. You stand shoulder to shoulder with 100 other men on the deck of a transport ship that's seen better days, probably during the last war or maybe never. The channel wind slices through your new uniform like it's paper, and even the strongest voices have gone quiet. There's nothing much to say now anyway. Just grey waves slapping against the hull and gulls screaming above like they're in mourning. Somewhere below deck, someone's playing a harmonica again. It always sounds slightly off, like it's tuned to the key of anxiety. A few soldiers gamble with torn scraps of newspaper for currency, half-hearted bets to distract themselves from the sour rocking of the boat and the knowledge that France is getting closer with every churn of the propeller. You clutch your rifle, not because you need it right now, but because it's something solid, something real. The sea is a mess of uncertainty. The rifle is cold steel and familiarity. When you finally see land, Calais, or maybe Boulogne, it's almost disappointing. No flags waving, no crowds cheering, just a grey coast under a grey sky, rain waiting piquantly in the clouds like it knows your name. Disembarking takes forever. You march off the boat and your boots squelch against the dock, soaked before the adventure even begins. The French dock workers barely glance at you. Just another load of British lads passing through, fresh-faced and clueless. From there it's trains, lots of trains, boxcars meant for cattle now packed with men and their gear. 40 hommes, 8 chevaux is stencilled on the side of one. 40 men or 8 horses, you're not sure which is more comfortable. You ride sitting on your kit, knees pressed into someone else's back, the air a blend of damp wool, sweat, and the occasional whiff of someone's lunch going in reverse. You pass through shattered villages, some still smouldering, others deserted, and oddly beautiful in their emptiness. Trees stripped bare, walls pockmarked with bullet holes. You see no people, but the landscape tells its own story. And as you bump along the rails deeper into the war zone, that excited fire in your chest starts to go cold. This isn't a movie, there's no swelling music, just the slow, grinding realization that this is all very, very real. The final leg is on foot. You march for hours, then days, down endless dirt roads flanked by ditches and barbed wire. Your pack feels heavier with every mile. The soles of your boots start to separate. Blisters bloom like angry flowers. You stop sleeping properly. Just brief naps by the roadside, sometimes standing up, sometimes with your helmet tilted over your eyes to block out the drizzle. You finally arrive at a rest area near the front. Not that there's much rest. It's a scattering of tents and low huts behind the main trench line, just far enough to be out of sniper range, but close enough that the ground shudders when the big guns fire. You get a mess tin full of lukewarm stew and something that might be bread. The stew is mostly water, with maybe a turnip and a hint of meat if you squint hard enough. You eat every bite. The sergeant lines you up and starts calling names, assigning trench sectors. You get paired with a corporal named Hughes, who doesn't smile much and chews tobacco like it's the only thing keeping him alive. He grunts for you to follow, and you do. There's nowhere else to go. You move at night. Always at night. The darkness is both cloak and curse. You walk in a single file, guided by the man in front of you, and the soft white glow of trench markers hung at intervals like ghost lights. The duckboards are slick and warped. One misstep and you're ankle deep in icy water or worse, something that used to be someone. And then you see it. The front line. It stretches like a scar across the countryside, broken only by crude wooden ladders and sandbag parapets. The sound is constant now. Gunfire, artillery, the occasional whistle of a flare sailing up and casting everything in harsh pale light for a few seconds before plunging it all back into black. This is the Western Front, your new address. Mail will reach you if you're lucky, or if you're unlucky enough to still be here long enough for it to arrive. And here's your historical fact of the evening. By 1915, trench warfare had become the dominant strategy on the Western Front, with each armada locked into defensive lines that barely moved more than a few miles in either direction over years. A brutal stalemate that turned the idea of rapid, noble warfare on its head. Battles lasted weeks, gains were measured in feet. Fringe fact, soldiers sometimes gave names to enemy shells based on their sound. There were whiz-bangs, fast artillery shells that offered no warning before impact. Others included minis, short for German Minenwerfer mortars, which moved slow enough that you could actually see them arching through the sky and possibly run. That kind of horror had a sense of humour, apparently. And then there's the debate. The age-old question, why didn't generals adapt sooner? Why did they continue with wave after wave of frontal assaults when it was clear the trenches nullified almost every traditional tactic? Some historians blame arrogance, others logistics. Still others argue that no one had ever fought a war like this before. There was no rule book, just guesses, bloody deadly guesses. Back in the trench, you're shown to your firing step, a ledge dug into the side of the trench where you'll stand and shoot if ordered. You practice poking your head up just enough to see without losing it. A sniper has already taken out 2 men today, you're told. They don't say it to scare you, it's just information. You climb into your dugout, a timber-reinforced pocket in the wall barely big enough to sit up straight in. You try to get comfortable on the plank floor using your helmet as a pillow. Your pack is your blanket. You wrap your coat tighter and listen, to the occasional rat skittering, to boots squelching above, to gunfire that never really stops. You're not sure when you fall asleep, but when you wake, it's still dark and someone is yelling, not in fear, just routine. Stand to! You fumble with your rifle. It's your first dawn in the trenches. You line up with the others, watching the sky shift from ink to bruised purple. That's when the attacks usually came. Everyone knows it. You wait, you watch, you pray to nothing in particular. No attack today, you breathe. Tomorrow might be different. It's hard to tell what day it is. Time doesn't really work the same in the trench. There's no Monday or Thursday, just before the last shelling and after the last rain. But you know it's your first full day at the front and everything still feels unfamiliar in that itchy, overstimulated way, like your skin doesn't know how to sit on your body yet. The trench itself is overwhelming, less like a structure and more like a slow-motion landslide that's decided to hold its shape. Earth and timber and water slapped together and held by sheer will. The layout is a confusing mess of switchbacks and narrow cuts, each named by some lunatic with a dark sense of humour. Suicide Corner, Dead Cow Alley, Shrapnel Street. You follow Corporal Hughes through a maze of shoulder-high walls reinforced with sandbags and salvaged sheet metal. Every turn brings a new scent. Sweat, rot, gun oil, mildew, and that odd, sweet-sour reek of something long dead and buried shallow. A few feet of earth separates you from the other side, the Germans, who are probably also having their own awkward orientation tours. Your first job is digging. Again, always digging. You learn fast that the trench is never finished. It's always slumping, sagging, flooding, collapsing under the weight of boots and rain and shelling. You and 2 others are given a pickaxe and a spade and told to deepen a drainage channel. Again, by the end of an hour, your back feels like it's sprouting new bones just to hurt in more places. You wipe your face and leave a streak of wet soil across your cheek. No one bothers to tell you. You all look the same now, filthy. And then, like a tourist on some hellish battlefield tour, you get shown the different zones. There's the firing bay, where the parapet's just low enough to shoot over, and just high enough that you might not get your head blown off. There's the communication trench, narrower and even more cramped, leading back toward the supply lines. There's the support trench 1 row back, where the reserves sleep and wait. And then there's no man's land, which you don't see but you feel. Just past the wire. Just beyond that lip of horizon, you're never supposed to peer over without cause. You pass a sandbagged alcove where 2 soldiers are playing cards on an overturned ammo crate. One of them lights a cigarette with shaking hands. The other just chews, watching the sky like he knows it's going to betray him any second. Above them, a crude sign is nailed into the wall, Hotel de Hell. Charming. Then there's the latrine, or what passes for it. A plank with a hole stretched across a deep, stinking pit. No walls, just a line of miserable men trying to pretend this is normal. It's not. Nothing is, but you use it anyway, because the alternative is worse. You learn to ignore the smell, sort of, or you never really stop smelling it. It just becomes part of the air, like oxygen, only angry. There's a brief moment of quiet in the afternoon. You sit on the fire step, helmet off, socks drying onto stick you've wedged between two sandbags. The sun even manages to sneak through the clouds for a while. You can almost feel warm again. Someone down the trench starts whistling, a broken, reedy tune that might have once been Pack Up Your Troubles. You hum along without realising. This is where it starts to settle in. Not the terror, not yet, but the grind. The sheer, unforgiving greyness of it all. No colour, no softness, just earth and sweat and distant thunder. It doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in like the damp under your collar. Historical fact? A typical trench on the Western Front was about 6 to 8 feet deep and 4 to 6 feet wide. They zigzag deliberately to limit the damage from explosions and prevent one long kill shot down the line if an enemy broke through. Some trenches were more elaborate than others, complete with duckboards to keep you out of the worst mud, sandbag revetments to hold the walls, and dugouts sometimes reinforced with tin sheets or stolen bricks. But most of them were just raw dirt, barely stable, often caving in. And the fringe fact for tonight? In some parts of the line, corpses were used to reinforce the walls. Dead men tucked into the earth with sandbags piled around them. They had been there too long to bury properly, and the trench couldn't spare the labour. So they stayed. You might find a boot poking out of the wall. You might know whose it was, you might not. The weird part is that after a while, even that stops feeling weird. A man becomes scenery. A body becomes a feature of the trench, like a rock or a tree stump. The human brain only has so much room for horror before it files it away as background noise. One thing soldiers endlessly debate, both then and now, is the morale problem. How did men endure this? How did anyone keep fighting under these conditions? Some say it was sheer camaraderie. Others point to discipline, patriotism, or the fear of letting their mates down. But maybe it was simpler. You didn't think about the big picture. You couldn't. You just focused on the next cigarette, the next dry pair of socks, the next letter from home. Survival was the victory. Later that day, you're assigned sentry duty at dusk. You stand watch as the sun bleeds out across the clouds, painting the sky with the softest colours you've seen in weeks, rose and gold and tangerine. It almost makes the barbed wire silhouette look poetic, almost. Your job is to look and listen. No moving, no sitting. Just your eyes, your ears, and the occasional terrifying flare that lights up no man's land in a burst of pale fire. The wire glints like teeth. You catch a glimpse of something out there. Movement, a bird, a man, you don't know. You whisper the word movement down the trench and the nearest soldier quietly readies his rifle, just in case. No one speaks louder than a breath. The moment passes. No shots, no alarms. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it wasn't. After 2 hours you're relieved. Your knees pop as you step down from the fire step. Your shoulders ache from holding your rifle still. You crawl into your dugout and collapse onto the plank floor, too tired to care about the rats sniffing near your boot. You close your eyes. The earth hums around you like a living thing. You made it through another day. Somehow. By now, the trench has begun to teach you its rhythms. It doesn't welcome you exactly. It tolerates you. Like a stray dog that might stop biting if you feed it long enough. There's a pattern to the way it breathes, creaks and oozes. You start to recognise the difference between distant artillery and the closer, throatier bark of trench mortars. You can hear the faint whir of a German sniper's bullet and guess how close it came by how fast your neighbour flattens to the wall. It's a horrible education, but it's education nonetheless. And today, you get a full tour of your classroom. It begins with your feet. Always your feet. The trench floor never dries, not for a minute. It's a sticky soup of mud, blood and rainwater that rises and falls with the weather and your spirits. Duckboards, those wooden slats laid across the worst of it, are supposed to keep you above the muck, but they're warped and slippery. One misstep and you're shin-deep in trench stew. Your boots are permanently wet. Your socks are stiff with the filth. You try to dry them, but nothing ever dries. The damp clings to everything like regret. You're assigned trench maintenance today. Not glamorous, but nothing is. You and a few others are given sacks of fresh sandbags, well, fresh being a generous word, and ordered to reinforce the fire step. The old ones have been shredded by rain and rats and the occasional stray round. You wedge them into gaps, shovel more mud, tamp down soft spots, and patch leaky walls with whatever you can find. One guy uses a broken mess tin. Another uses a piece of a rotted wooden crate with flour still faintly stencilled on it. Above you, the sky is doing its best impression of dishwater. Grey, heavy, a low ceiling of gloom. Every now and then a raindrop taps your helmet like a reminder. Still here, still miserable as though, but even that's preferable to shellfire. The worst part of the trench might be the smell. It's hard to describe unless you've lived in it. It's layered. Dank earth and rotting wood, sure, but also the sour funk of unwashed men, the metallic tang of old blood, the chemical sting of disinfectant powder, and underneath it all something sweet and awful. Dead things. Sometimes human, sometimes not. The trench doesn't care. Then there are the latrines, little more than holes carved into side compartments called sumps, where privacy is a luxury no one can afford. The trick, you're told, is to breathe through your mouth and keep your boots well away from the edge. You try not to look at the writhing things at the bottom. You try not to imagine how many men have leaned over this same pit, thinking the same thoughts. Some soldiers claim the smell builds immunity. Others say it kills your soul a little each time. Both might be true. You walk past dugouts stacked like rabbit holes in the trench wall. Some are just shallow scrapes with a tarp thrown over the entrance. Others are slightly more civilised, timber lined with crates for furniture, maybe a mirror nailed to the wall, maybe a candle stub flickering with uncertain loyalty. Yours is still just dirt and a few planks, but the man across from you has an actual pillow. Stolen from an officer, most likely. The man sleeps with one eye open. You stop at the parapet, the forward-facing wall of the trench, to check your field of fire. A few periscopes are wedged between sandbags, crudely made with the cracked mirrors and warped handles. You peer through one. No man's land stares back, flat and littered with broken wire, shell craters and discarded gear. It looks like the moon, if the moon had a habit of eating men. You spot a rusted helmet halfway buried and wonder if it still has an owner beneath it. You don't linger on the thought. Here's your historical bit for the night. Trench systems weren't just a single line. They were a vast network. Front line, support line, reserve line, all connected by communication trenches like veins in a dying beast. Some stretches were reinforced with concrete and even had underground bunkers. Others were nothing more than mud pits and wishful thinking. In the British sectors, the standard trench layout included fire bays every 20 feet, saps that extended slightly into no man's land, and strong points known as redoubts, essentially little forts carved into the network. And now, a fringe detail for flavour. British soldiers often improvised furniture in their dugouts, chairs made from ration boxes, shelves carved into dirt walls, even flower pots made from shell casings with little wildflowers jammed inside. It didn't make things comfortable, but it made things theirs. One guy in your section even has a framed photo of his dog, a spaniel, all floppy ears and smug eyes. He calls her Corporal Fluff. There's a long-standing debate among historians about trench quality between armies. British and French trenches, especially early in the war, were often more temporary and shoddy, since the plan was always to advance. The Germans, thinking long-term, built theirs with meticulous care, concrete bunkers, drainage systems, even electric lighting in some places. Some British soldiers who raided German lines came back impressed, or bitter. Later, you're tasked with helping carry ammunition from the rear to the front line. You load up sandbags full of shells and drag them along the communication trench, ducking every few feet in case of shelling. The weight grinds into your shoulders, the straps biting through your jacket. You slip twice on wet planks and bruise your hip. No one helps. Everyone's too busy doing the same thing. You pass a stretcher team coming the other way, 2 men carrying a third, blood-slicked and unconscious. You step aside silently. He's not screaming. That's the worst sign. By the end of the day, your hands are blistered, your boots are heavier, and your mouth tastes like iron from biting down too hard when the shells got close. You collapse on your plank and try to write a letter home. You get as far as "Dear Mum," and then just stare at the paper. What do you even say? Trench is fine, food's awful, rats are aggressive. Doesn't seem to capture the full picture. You fold it up and put it away, maybe tomorrow. A rat scurries over your pack, then pauses on your chest like it owns the place. You swat at it weakly. It doesn't bother running, just drops down and vanishes into the wall like a ghost. You laugh quietly, because if you don't, you'll cry, and no one has time for that. It doesn't take long before you start remembering names, not just the faces smeared with mud or half hidden under helmets, but the small details that make each of them human in a place designed to strip that away. The trench has its own cast of characters, and you're now officially part of the show. There's no curtain call, no encore, just a constant performance where the stakes are life, death, or foot rot. You bunk closest to Private Dixon, a lanky bloke from Leeds with ears that seem to flap whenever the wind hits just right. He's a chatterbox, which you wouldn't expect from someone who's seen 2 offensives already. But it's his way of coping, you think. He talks to fill the silence, to fight off the scream that silence eventually becomes out here. He tells stories about his girlfriend back home. Her letters always smell faintly of lavender, and how he once met a famous footballer by accident outside a fish shop. You nod along even when you've heard it twice already. He needs to tell it. You need to listen. Corporal Hughes, your original guide to this muddy nightmare, remains gruff and unshakable. He sleeps with one eye open, snores like a chainsaw, and has an opinion about everything, especially the state of the army's leadership. Couldn't organise a tea party without setting the table on fire, he mutters, during mess one night, chewing through a biscuit that sounds like it was baked in 1870. Then there's Adams, the quiet one, small, wiry, and jittery, like a sparrow, always clutching his rifle like it's a lifeline. He hardly speaks, but when he does, his voice is oddly delicate, like he's afraid it might break. Rumour has it he was a schoolteacher before the war. Now he spends hours whittling little figures out of bullet casings, lining them up on the shelf in his dugout like they might protect him. And don't forget Mad Mac, short for McAllister, who earned his nickname not because he's unstable, though maybe a little, but because of the way he laughs during bombardments. Proper, deep belly laughs. Says it rattles the fear loose from his bones, or maybe it's already rattled free and this is just what's left. Either way, his laughter echoes down the trench like a pub brawl being enjoyed by one. You share your first proper smoke with them all after a long night of watch duty. A roll-up passed hand to hand, lit from a stubby candle held between Dixon's knees to keep the wind from snuffing it out. You all sit, backs to the trench wall, not really talking, just existing. And for a few minutes, the war feels like it's somewhere else. There's a strange comfort in the awful routine. Wake, eat, sort of. Clean your rifle, shovel muck, watch the line, dodge death. Repeat. The men find odd ways to personalise their suffering. Some sing, some carve their names into wooden boards or write crude poems on dugout walls. Dixon's got a sketch pad he guards more fiercely than his rations. He's drawn everyone in the unit at least once. You've seen your face in pencil, more gaunt than you remember, but unmistakably you. He even got the little scar on your chin. One fellow, Big Tom, has a puppet made from 2 buttons and a sock. He uses it to reenact arguments with officers when they're out of earshot. Private Snuffles gives rousing speeches about how to survive the mud, then gets unceremoniously stuffed back into a rucksack when patrols pass by. It's all absurd, but it's what keeps the walls from closing in. And here's your historical anchor for tonight. The British Army in WWI was a patchwork of men from all walks of life. Factory workers, farmhands, clerks, students, even aristocrats who volunteered out of a sense of duty. Entire units were formed from the same towns or social clubs, known as Pals Battalions. The idea was simple. Fight with the men you grew up with. The consequence, of course, was devastating. When a battalion took heavy losses, entire communities back home were gutted in a single day. Fringe fact, some soldiers brought pets to the trenches. Cats, dogs, even monkeys. Not all of them survived, obviously, but those that did became mascots. Symbols of luck, of life, of something not entirely ruined by war. One battalion reportedly had a goat named William, who wore a gas mask and headbutted anyone who tried to mess with the cook's stew. There's an old debate among war scholars about why trench soldiers didn't simply collapse into madness en masse. The argument goes, how does one maintain sanity under constant threat, in perpetual filth surrounded by death? One school suggests it was the strength of group cohesion, that as long as the man next to you stood, you would too. Others argue that the sheer monotony of war created its own weird version of stability. You didn't go mad because you didn't have time to. The war was boring mostly until it wasn't, and by then you were too numb to scream. Your day ends with a round of trench cricket, which despite the name doesn't involve a ball or a bat. It's more of a verbal game, where each man has to name a British town and follow it with a made-up fact. Dixon starts with, "In Hull all horses wear socks." Adams follows with, "They don't have time in Liverpool, just one long Tuesday." You manage, "Folkestone's official food is regret." That earns a genuine laugh. McAllister finishes the round with, "I once kissed a girl in Manchester, and she said I tasted like biscuits and despair." You all lose it. Night comes fast, as it always does. You crawl into your corner of the dugout and try not to think. Thinking's dangerous. But just before sleep catches you, you wonder what you'll be like when this is over. If it ever is. If you'll be able to laugh like this again, somewhere clean, somewhere dry, somewhere no one is screaming. For now, you're here, with your lads and your ghosts in waiting, and you're still breathing. That's something. You wake to something crawling. Not a metaphor, not a bad dream, something real, something alive. It's burrowed into your collar, maybe your sleeve, maybe deeper. You slap at it, yank your tunic open, and there it is, small, pale and wriggling. Another louse. Your 5th today. Probably your 50th this week. You've stopped counting. They've moved in, laid eggs, built a community, probably voted on a mayor. You strip off your tunic and start picking them out one by one, cracking them between your thumbnails with a satisfying pop that's only satisfying for the first dozen. After that, it's just war. The lice are relentless. They nest in your seams, in the folds of your socks, behind your ears if you're not careful. Everyone has them. It's an unspoken truth, like the sky being grey or the food being awful. Dixon claims his lice have names. "This one's Nigel," he says, holding up a fat little monster. "We've grown close." Delousing is a ritual. Every few days, you get a break in the rear lines where there's a fire pit set up, and you hold your shirt over the flame to kill the eggs without burning the cloth. The scent of singed wool and desperation lingers in your nostrils for hours. Some blokes even shave their heads to slow the infestation. You're tempted. But the cold bites hard and you need every scrap of warmth, even if it's lice-infested. Then there are the fleas, the ticks, the mysterious bite marks that appear overnight, blooming red and angry along your legs or waistline. You scratch until you bleed. You all do. It's just another trench chorus. Coughing, cursing, scratching, and their occasional yell when someone discovers something new, tunneling under their skin. And let's talk about the uniform. You remember how proud you were to wear it the first time? How stiff and proper it looked in the mirror back in training camp? That crisp collar, that shining brass button. Yeah, not anymore. Now it's crusted with mud, stiff with grime and smells like old cheese left in the boot. The wool never dries, not completely. Even on the rare days the sun peeks through, you're still damp underneath. You've got a rash on your inner thighs that might be permanent. The boots don't help. Leather stiff as bark, heels worn down from miles of marching in uneven muck. You've stuffed straw into the soles for padding, and even that's gone soggy and begun to rot. Your greatcoat, the pride of the uniform, weighs as much as a full-grown cat when it's dry. Wet? You could drown in it, but you need it. When the night wind comes, slicing through the trench like a knife dipped into sleet, it's all you've got between you and hypothermia. You curl into it like a shell, hoping your body heat doesn't leak out before morning. There's a particular horror in the wetness, not just the discomfort. It's the creeping rot that begins to gnaw at your feet. Trench foot, they call it. A medical term that sounds almost quaint, until you see what it does. Feet swollen like loaves of bread, skin going grey, then black, toes turning to mush. You've seen one man's boot removed only to find 2 toes came off with it. He didn't scream, he just looked down and muttered, "Well, that's that then." You've started the foot care ritual. Every night. Like sacred scripture. You pull off your boots with a squelch, peel off your socks, and examine your feet like a concerned parent. Rub them dry with a filthy rag. Apply whale oil if you can scrounge any. Put on your one pair of dry socks, dry being a relative term, and hang the others over a bent bit of barbed wire in your dugout. It's a dance with decay. You don't always win. Your historical fact tonight? The British Army issued wool uniforms that were never designed for this kind of prolonged exposure. They were hot in summer, heavy in winter, and a paradise for lice. Uniform improvements came slowly and inconsistently. Better boots, new buttons, extra layers. But the conditions overwhelmed the kit. Soldiers in 1916 were still wearing gear from 1914, and the mud didn't care how noble your epaulettes looked. Fringe fact, There were lice poetry contests. No, seriously. Men would write verses about their tiny trench mates, swapping odes to Sir Lot and Captain Bitey as a way of staying sane. There was even a game called Louse Races, where soldiers would place lice on a mess tin and bet on which would crawl across first. War makes gamblers of everyone, even with parasites. But beyond the crawling things and the rashy misery, there's the smell. The way the trench seeps into your very skin. You stop noticing it most of the time, but when someone new shows up, fresh from the rear, washed and powdered, you can smell they're clean. It's offensive, really. Jarring. You don't realise how much you've adapted to filth until you catch a whiff of soap and recoil like it's poison gas. There's a debate among the lads. Is it better to be clean and cold or warm and filthy? Most vote filthy. Warmth wins, always. Cleanliness is a fantasy, a luxury that exists only in letters from home and memories of bathtubs. You don't dream of medals anymore. You dream of soap, warm water, dry socks, maybe a towel that doesn't smell like mildew and despair. Your day ends with a louse hunt. Everyone strips down to their long johns and inspects each other's seams by candlelight. Someone finds a full clutch of eggs in McAllister's sleeve. Dixon performs a mock funeral. You all salute. It's absurd, but it's what passes for entertainment. Later, in the dead quiet of early morning, you lie awake scratching at your ankle, feeling the welts rise and spread like gossip. Somewhere up the trench, someone sings a lullaby under their breath. Off-key, cracked by cold, but weirdly soothing. The lice crawl, the trench oozes, your boots stink, and still somehow you sleep. Breakfast arrives with all the ceremony of a prison sentence. You're handed a tin mess cup that's half full of something that started life as tea, and somewhere along the way lost the will to live. It's lukewarm, bitter, and metallic, like someone boiled an old penny and stirred in a hint of smoke. But you drink it. Everyone drinks it. Because it's hot, barely, and it's not water drawn from a trench-side sump with things floating in it. Then comes the real gamble. Rations. You're handed a hunk of hardtack biscuit, one that's so dense it could qualify as a weapon if thrown with enough conviction. You knock it against the butt of your rifle just to prove the point. Dixon tries to bite into his and nearly chips a molar. Delicious, he mumbles, chewing like a man trying to eat drywall. There's also corned beef, a bully beef they call it. Comes in tins, vaguely pink, greasy and suspicious. If you're lucky, it's still solid. If you're unlucky, it's developed a shimmer and a smell that says it's turned. Some mornings you get plum jam, not often, and never enough to do more than swipe across the biscuit like an apology. Still, it's the highlight of the day. You ration it in tiny dabs, pretending each bite is more flavourful than it is. Once someone dropped their jam tin into the mud, and 4 men just stood around in mourning, hats off like it was a fallen comrade. Eating becomes a bizarre ritual of negotiation. You trade bits of whatever you have for a bite of something slightly better. One fellow has hoarded 3 sugar cubes and guards them like diamonds. Another always seems to have a spare spoon, though no one knows where he keeps finding them. You've started swapping your corned beef for extra biscuits, which you then soak in the sad excuse for tea just to make them chewable. And then there are the weevils. Oh yes, they come free with the biscuits. Little white wrigglers tucked into the cracks, like protein sprinkles. The first time you see one, you gag. By the 3rd week, you're picking them out with the tip of your knife. By the 4th, you just eat around them. By the 5th, you stop noticing. Survival adjusts your standards. Every few days, a fresh batch of rations comes in from the rear line, carried by mules or trucks or unlucky men with carts. If the weather's bad, and it's always bad, deliveries get delayed. Once, you went 30 hours without more than a sip of cold stew and a crumbling biscuit you found in your coat pocket. It's terrifying how fast your body gets used to hunger. The gnawing becomes background noise, like the distant shelling or the drip of trench water. You only notice when it's gone. And when the real treats show up, oh, it's a holiday. Tinned peaches, real butter, a strip of bacon so thin it's practically spiritual. You huddle together around a tiny spirit stove and fry it in silence, letting the smell wrap around you like a memory of better places. No one speaks during those meals. You just chew and pretend you're somewhere else, anywhere else. Your historical tidbit for today: the British Army ration, officially, was supposed to include a generous amount of bread, meat, vegetables, jam, tea, and even rum. In reality, the farther you were from the supply line, the more that list turned into a work of fiction. Soldiers joked that the real menu was 2 bricks and a question mark. Even when supply officers did their best, logistics during war are a nightmare. Muddy roads, shelled bridges, lost wagons, and the constant pressure of feeding millions. Fringe fact, some trench cooks, called field kitchen wizards, got creative. They'd mix up trench pudding from stale biscuits soaked in hot water, mashed with jam and the occasional spoon of condensed milk. It tasted like sadness, but warm sadness. Others baked in old ammo tins, making hard little cakes that tasted faintly of cordite and hope. One legend tells of a private who made rat stew by accident, or so he claimed. No one complained. Everyone went back for seconds, and now one of the weirder debates among historians, was the food really that bad, or have we exaggerated it in hindsight? Some war records suggest that meals in reserve areas were surprisingly hearty, fresh meat, baked bread, even a chocolate. But once you were in the front lines, it was an entirely different reality. The army did what it could, but rot, rats, and relentless shelling made eating properly nearly impossible. So while the supply list looked good on paper, your stomach told a different story. Lunch, if you can call it that, is cold bully beef smeared on another rock-hard biscuit. You pretend it's a sandwich. Dixon starts singing about onions and gravy like it's a Broadway show tune. McAllister adds backup harmony. You all laugh, mouths full, eyes half dead. Dinner is stew if the word applies. It's water with bits. Sometimes the bits are vegetables, sometimes they're meat. Sometimes no one's entirely sure. You eat fast because it cools fast, and once it's cold it turns into a glutinous blob that's harder to swallow than your fear. And every few nights, if you're lucky, they dole out the sacred ration of rum. Just a tot, maybe 2 fingers in a dented mug, but it burns like sunlight going down. You drink it slowly, let it warm your chest, your bones, your soul. You close your eyes and pretend it's something fancier, something shared with friends back home over jokes that don't end in death. The rum makes you sleepy, makes the lice easier to ignore, makes the trench blur into something softer. For a little while, anyway. As you drift towards sleep, your stomach not quite full, your mind replays every bite you ate. You think about warm bread, real butter, roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, and then the memory fades, replaced by the scent of bully beef and the sharp little crunch of something that definitely wasn't biscuit. You roll over, lick the jam off your fingers, and pull your coat tighter. Another gourmet day in paradise. It starts as a faint scurrying in the dark. You're half asleep, curled on your side with your helmet under your head and your coat pulled over your legs, when something rustles near your ear. You blink, groggy, unsure if it's real or just another dream where the mud eats you slowly. Then, movement. Something darts across your chest. You bolt upright, heart hammering. And there it is, right at your feet, lit by the guttering stub of a candle, a rat. Not one of those little grey squeakers from back home. No, this one is the size of a small terrier, with matted fur and eyes like wet marbles. It looks at you like you're the intruder. You throw your boot at it. It dodges without flinching and scampers into a crack in the dugout wall, dragging something with it. Something that glints for just a second. Could have been a button. Could have been a tooth. You don't want to know. Rats are as much a part of trench life as mud and bullets. You can't escape them. You hear them every night, scrabbling along the duckboards, squeaking in the walls, gnawing through food tins, crawling across sleeping bodies like it's just another Tuesday. Dixon once woke up with one chewing on his ear. It was polite enough, he says, half joking. Didn't take more than a nibble. You start seeing them in the daytime too, bold and unbothered, climbing over packs, sniffing through mess kits, sprinting along the firing step like they've got somewhere important to be. Sometimes they fight, 2 fat brutes tumbling over each other, squealing, a blur of filthy fur and gnashing teeth. It's not uncommon to find one gnawed half to death by its own kind. Trench rats eat anything. Corpses, leftovers, each other, you included. If you stood still long enough. The real horror? They're breeding. Fast, an endless supply. Whole rat dynasties, generations born and raised in dugouts and shell holes, thriving in the chaos. There's a kind of sick admiration in it. The rats are winning the war. You wouldn't be surprised if they eventually start wearing tiny helmets and organising night patrols. There's a guy in C Company. No one remembers his real name, just that everyone calls him Piper. Claims he keeps a rat as a pet. Smart little bastard, he says. Comes when I whistle. No one's seen it. Most don't believe him. But every time Piper eats, he leaves a little chunk of biscuit off to the side, just in case. And it's always gone by morning. Eventually, you develop a sort of ceasefire with the rats. You stop trying to kill them, there are too many too fast, and instead focus on deterrence. You hang your food from the dugout beams in empty shell crates. You tuck your boots into your pack at night. You shake out your socks before putting them on, just in case someone decided to make a nest. Still, it's impossible to keep them out. They know your trench better than you do. They've mapped every tunnel, every hidden space, every safe corner, and they're fearless. One night you watch a rat drag a piece of bread out from under Hughes's arm while he's sleeping. The thing makes direct eye contact with you the whole time, like it dares you to do something. You don't. You're too tired. You just roll over and let it win. Historical fact time, rats were a genuine plague on the front lines. The conditions of the trenches, constant food scraps, unburied corpses, damp hiding spots, were perfect for them. Some estimates say millions of rats infested the trenches during the war. British soldiers described them as the size of cats, and while that might be a slight exaggeration, they were big enough to be alarming. Soldiers sometimes formed rat hunting squads in their spare time, armed with bayonets, shovels, or even terriers smuggled from home. Fringe fact? Some rats were actually decorated. There's an apocryphal story about a rat named Rupert that supposedly alerted an entire platoon to a gas attack by squeaking and panicking before the canisters landed. The soldiers put a tin medal around its neck and fed it rum-soaked biscuit for a week. Most likely made up, but that didn't stop the trench from retelling it like gospel. Everyone wanted to believe there was something, even a rat, on their side. The question still debated by historians is just how much the rat infestation impacted health and morale. While lice and trenchfoot were officially addressed by the army with prevention strategies and supplies, rats were mostly shrugged off. Command treated them as a nuisance, not a threat, but to the men in the trench they were more than that. They symbolised the rot, the filth, the breakdown of everything that made life feel worth protecting. If the rats had taken over, what did that say about humanity? Some nights when you're lying in your dugout and hear the squeaking get louder, closer, you wonder if they know something. If they can sense when a shell's about to hit or a sniper's about to fire. There's a theory that if you see rats running in one direction, you should follow. They've survived more bombardments than any of you. They've adapted to this hell and made it their playground. That night you wake to find one sitting at the edge of your helmet. Just watching. Not moving. Just watching. You stare back. Eventually it scurries off into the dark. You fall asleep wondering if it's going to come back, and whether next time it'll bring friends. The letter comes on a Tuesday, or maybe a Wednesday. It's hard to tell anymore. The days bleed together like ink in the rain, and the concept of a week feels about as real as a unicorn. But the letter, that's real. It arrives folded and smudged, passed down the line by a mail runner with hollow eyes and a permanent hunch. The poor lad sagging under the weight of news from home. When he reaches your section, he doesn't even speak, just starts calling out names and tossing envelopes like he's dealing cards in a game no one wants to play. You recognise your name on the third pass. The handwriting alone is enough to stop your breath. It's from your sister. Maybe your mother wrote one too, but if she did, it's lost somewhere between Dover and the Somme, probably chewed up by mud or shredded by shrapnel. You slide the letter into your coat pocket without opening it. Not yet. You need quiet. You need space. You need to remember how to feel something before you read it. Mail is sacred in the trench. It's the only thing that cuts through the wet grey numbness, like a warm knife through hard biscuit. Men talk about mail day like it's Christmas. They swap rumours about new deliveries, argue over who's received the most letters, and guard their envelopes with the kind of intensity usually reserved for rations and dry socks. Some sleep with them tucked inside their tunics. Others reread the same 2 paragraphs 100 times, memorising the curve of each word like scripture. Eventually, when your watch ends and you've scraped the last of the breakfast stew from your mess tin, you find a spot nearer the dugout entrance and unfold the paper slowly. Your fingers are trembling, either from cold or from whatever this letter might contain, or maybe both. Your sister writes about the little things, how the neighbour's dog had puppies, how the shopkeeper's boy finally proposed to that red-haired girl who used to sell sweets at the corner. She writes about the weather, warmer than usual, the garden, thriving now that Dad's got the hang of watering, and the local news, someone spotted a zeppelin in the night sky, but no one was sure if it was real or just a drunk fisherman seeing stars. She tells you she misses you, that Mum prays for you every night, that Dad doesn't say much but keeps your room just as you left it, dust and all. There's no mention of the war, not directly, just a gentle, aching kind of avoidance. She doesn't ask what it's like out here. You both know she already suspects, and asking would only force you to lie. So she keeps the tone light, the updates cheerful, the ink smudged just a little on the closing line. Please write soon. We all love you. You stare at those last words until your vision blurs. You fold the letter carefully, press it to your lips for a second and tuck it into your breast pocket. It stays there, close to your heart, like a shield made of paper. Other lads read theirs aloud. Some cry openly, some go quiet. One bloke, Murphy, gets a letter from his wife and doesn't speak for 3 days. Turns out she's left him, found someone else. He didn't even get a name, just someone from the factory. He burns the letter without reading the rest. Doesn't even watch it turn to ash. Just walks off toward the latrine and sits there for an hour in the rain. Dixon gets a letter from his mum and reads it twice before tearing into the parcel that came with it. Biscuits, real ones, crumbly and sweet, baked at home and wrapped in wax paper. He offers you one. You take it without a word and chew slowly, letting the taste pull you backward through time all the way to childhood afternoons and warm kitchens. You think about licking your fingers, but then remember where those fingers have been. Historical footnote for tonight. The postal service during World War I was shockingly efficient. Letters from home could reach soldiers in the trenches within 2 or 3 days, depending on location and weather. Millions of letters were delivered each week, carried by rail, sea and horse-drawn cart, often through shellfire and across bombed roads. The army knew the value of mail, morale depended on it, so they made it work, even when nothing else seemed to. Fringe fact, some men wrote letters to their dogs, not girlfriends, not mothers, not children, dogs, and they'd get responses too, penned by family members on behalf of the pup, full of tail wags and barking encouragement. One soldier even wrote a serial adventure starring his spaniel, printed in each weekly letter like a children's storybook for grown men in hell. Of course, there's the flip side. Not everyone gets mail. Some never do. The men who wait and wait and wait, eyes flicking every time the runner appears, but nothing ever comes. And eventually they stop asking, stop hoping. You can see the change in their posture, the slump of someone forgotten. There's a question that hangs over every letter you send back. What do you say? What can you say? You can't tell them the truth, that you spend half your days ankle-deep in corpses and the other half wondering if you'll be one of them, that the food is trash, the cold is endless, and the only thing louder than the guns is the screaming. So you lie. Or you dustle, maybe you dodge. You write about the sunrise, about how the rats are getting cheekier, about how you and the lads play cards to pass the time. You even mention the trench cricket tournament, conveniently omitting the fact that the bat was a rifle butt and the ball was a balled-up sock soaked in bacon grease. Your next letter will be short, probably just a few lines, but you'll fold it with care, kiss the corner like a charm, and hope it makes it home in one piece. Maybe you'll ask for socks. Maybe you'll ask for something sweet. Maybe you'll ask for nothing at all and just say you're fine, because that's easier for everyone. As the sun begins to set behind the sandbags, you see a group of men huddled around a single envelope, reading a letter aloud from a friend who's been transferred. They're smiling, laughing. For a moment, they sound like kids at summer camp. That's what a letter does. It bends time, breaks through the war, reminds you there's a world beyond this nightmare still spinning. You lie back in the dugout and press your hand against your coat right where the letter rests. And for the first time all day, you almost feel human again. The strangest part of trench life is how much of it is spent waiting. Not fighting, not running, just waiting. You don't realise this when you enlist. The posters showed men charging with bayonets, waving flags, storming enemy lines under blue skis and victory music. No one ever mentioned the hours you'd spend staring at the same patch of mud, counting breaths between distant explosions, or playing the same card game with the same muddy cards until you forget what fun ever felt like. Today is one of those days, still, grey and heavy. The kind of day that presses on your chest. No enemy attack, no patrols scheduled, no urgent repairs, just maintenance, drudgery, and the long, aching drag of hours that don't want to move. You sit on the fire step with Dixon, both of you chewing on the last crumbs of a stale biscuit and pretending it's enough to keep your stomach quiet. Ever think about just walking away, he mutters, not looking at you? You think about it all the time. You don't say that out loud. Instead, you shrug, then nod. He chuckles, but there's no joy in it, just tired recognition. The thing about the waiting is that it's never peaceful. Even in silence, your nerves buzz like power lines, because the shelling could start again at any second, or not. Or maybe there's a sniper watching you right now, finger on the trigger, waiting for your head to lift an inch too high above the sandbags. The uncertainty grinds down harder than the noise ever could. You flinch when someone sneezes. You panic when the wind shifts and a branch creaks. Time doesn't just move slowly here, it drags. You mark the hours by habit. Tea at dawn, foot inspection mid-morning, stew at noon, watch rotation in the afternoon, patrol assignments posted at dusk, and somewhere between each of these, endless stretches of standing, staring, listening, and wondering if this will be the day something finally happens. Card games help. You and McAllister and Adams sit in a half-collapsed dugout playing whist on a piece of tin. The cards are soft with grime, the corners curled, faces faded. You all know the hands by heart. Dixon's always lucky, McAllister cheats with a grin, Adams barely pays attention but somehow always wins. You argue over rules, accuse each other of smuggling extra cards in your socks, and then deal again. Others read. Well, pretend to. Hughes has had the same tattered newspaper clipping in his pocket since October, and he unfolds it every afternoon like he's discovering it for the first time. The article's about the king visiting wounded soldiers in a hospital somewhere in Kent. Hughes reads it aloud sometimes, adding bits that definitely weren't there before. And then His Majesty asked for more stew, and they gave him bully beef instead, poor sod. You do small things to keep your hands busy. You clean your rifle even though it's already spotless. You carve your initials into the wooden stock. You sew a button back onto your coat with thread borrowed from Dixon's emergency pack, which is mostly empty but somehow always has just what you need. And you listen, to stories mostly. Everyone's got one, some are real, most aren't. One lad swears he saw a ghost in no man's land standing in the fog in full Napoleonic uniform just staring. Another claims he found a rabbit living in a shell crater, and it saluted him. You don't question it. You nod, laugh, and add your own. The time you heard singing from the German lines late at night. No words, just a voice deep and low drifting across the dark like smoke. You still don't know if it was real. Here's your historical fact for today. Most soldiers in the trenches spent 80% of their time in non-combat activities. Digging, repairing, cleaning, waiting. Major offensives and direct fighting were rare compared to the day-to-day grind. The average soldier's war was more about tedium and endurance than heroic charges. The phrase war of attrition wasn't just about bullets, it was about sanity. Fringe fact, some soldiers trained fleas. Yes, you heard that right. In the midst of boredom and infestation, a few developed tiny arenas in mess tins or biscuit lids and would bet on whose flea could jump farthest. They'd name them Captain Leapy, Sir Jump-a-Lot and hold entire tournaments. It was absurd, it was stupid, it kept men from falling apart. Scholars still argue over which was more psychologically damaging, combat or the waiting. The surprise attacks, the screams, the chaos, those were horrific, yes, but the stillness in between, that's what cracked men open. Some called it anticipatory dread, the knowledge that something terrible could happen, any second, and that helplessness eroded the mind. Like being locked in a room with a ticking bomb you can't see and aren't allowed to leave. You begin to notice strange rituals forming. McAllister always taps the side of the trench 3 times before stepping onto the firing step. Adams whispers something to his bullets before loading them. Dixon hums the same tune before dawn patrol. You don't even know where these habits came from. You just know they feel necessary, little charms against an unpredictable world. You catch yourself doing them too, tapping your helmet twice before you eat, holding your breath for 7 steps when walking past Suicide Corner. Late in the day, a flare goes up. Green, not a warning, just a test shot. But everyone freezes, breath held. You wait, count to 10, nothing. Just a pigeon flapping out of the trench wall like it was eavesdropping and got startled. You exhale, go back to your game. Night falls with the usual gloom. Fog rolls in low and thick, curling through the trenches like a ghost. You climb into your dugout, still warm from your body's last visit, and settle in. The walls seem closer now. The candle flickers like it's unsure if it wants to keep burning. You listen to the quiet. You wait. Something's changed in the air. You feel it before you see it, like a charge humming along your spine, an invisible shift in the way the trench breathes. It's still quiet, yes, but not the usual quiet. This isn't boredom. It's stillness with teeth. The lads feel it too. Dixon doesn't talk this morning. McAllister's laugh is missing. Even Hughes skips his usual rant about incompetent officers. Everyone's eyes are distant, focused on nothing and everything. You don't ask what's wrong, you know already. It's him, Barrett. He hasn't spoken in 2 days. He lies in his dugout, curled against the trench wall like a man trying to disappear into the earth. Not wounded, not sick, just gone inside himself. You saw him come back from night watch 2 nights ago, moving like he was made of paper, soaked through and stiff. He sat down on the fire step and didn't get up for hours, stared at nothing, didn't blink much, didn't respond when Dixon joked about how bad he smelled, and now he won't speak, won't eat, won't even flinch when a nearby shell sends a tremor through the walls. You've heard about this, not in training of course. They don't teach you what to do when a man's mind snaps like a rifle stock. But whispers move through the trenches faster than letters. It's called shell shock, they say. War strain. Nerves. Different names, same face, a man hollowed out. Lights on, no one home. You've seen it before, just not this close. Not someone you shared a canteen with. Dixon tries to pull him out of it, offers him a smoke, a sip of rum, even one of his precious biscuits. Nothing. McAllister crouches beside him for 10 minutes in silence, then pats his shoulder and walks away. Hughes just mutters, "Seen it before. Poor bastard's gone soft upstairs." He doesn't say it cruelly, just tired. Eventually the sergeant comes. He squats down, says Barrett's name a few times, slaps his face once, not hard, just enough to try and wake him up. Barrett blinks, that's all. The sergeant sighs, stands up and calls for 2 stretcher bearers. They arrive 15 minutes later, not in a rush, not surprised. This is routine for them. They lift Barrett carefully, as if he's broken glass, and carry him away through the communication trench. He doesn't scream, doesn't fight, just stares upward at the fog-draped sky, eyes wide like he's looking at something you can't see. And then he's gone. Nobody says much for the rest of the day. A quiet falls like ash. You go through the motions, eating, cleaning your rifle, stomping your feet to keep the chill off, but everything feels a little off. Barrett's dugout is already being cleared for someone new. The trench doesn't pause for grief. Later you ask Hughes what'll happen to him. He shrugs. Could be hospital, could be home, could be firing squad. Firing squad. The words settle like stones in your stomach. It's not just talk. You know that now. Soldiers have been executed for cowardice and desertion. Legal terms stretched thin over the complex, messy reality of broken men. Men who couldn't take it anymore. Some walked away, some froze, some broke, and the army, in its iron logic, punished them for it. Make an example, keep the rest in line. Your historical fact tonight: over 300 British soldiers were executed during World War I for cowardice, desertion, and other offences linked to psychological collapse. Most were young, often under 25, many of them suffering from what we now recognise as post-traumatic stress disorder. But back then the language was crude. You were either brave or you weren't. There was no grey. Fringe fact: some soldiers faked shell shock to get out of the line, until they realised it didn't always get them sent home. Sometimes it meant straight to the loony bins, where treatments included ice baths, electric shocks, and forced isolation. Others were subjected to a bizarre therapy involving farcical stage performances to jolt them back to normal. That's right, literal war theatre. Picture men in nurse outfits doing stare while the patient watched, confused and trembling. War is deeply unfunny, but that one borders on satire. Scholars still debate what shell shock was exactly. Was it purely psychological, or did the concussive force of shell blasts physically damage the brain? Could it be both? The line between body and mind blurred in those trenches. You saw men walk out of bombardments talking nonsense for days, others suddenly unable to hold a spoon without shaking. One lad went blind for 3 weeks, no injury, no trauma, just gone. And then, just as suddenly, it came back. The doctors were baffled, everyone else just nodded and moved on. That night, you can't sleep, not properly. Every time you shut your eyes, you see Barrett's face, those wide, empty eyes. You imagine what it felt like to slip away like that, piece by piece, until nothing's left but breath and heartbeat. You wonder if you'll be next. You check yourself for signs. Are your hands shaking more than usual? Is your jaw clenched tighter? Are the dreams getting louder? The answer is yes to all of it. But you wake the next morning, that counts. You put on your wet socks, pull on your coat and climb out of the dugout. The sky is grey again. Someone's already boiling tea water over a spirit stove. You scratch your neck, feel a louse, and squash it with your thumb. Still here, still going. For now, the whistle blows at dawn. Not the casual kind, not the quick tweet the sergeant uses to call you for breakfast or to tell you you're marching in the wrong direction. This one's sharp, prolonged, final. It cuts through the morning fog like a blade, and your stomach drops because you know exactly what it means. It's time to go over the top. You've been dreading this moment since you first laid eyes on no man's land. You've heard stories, seen men come back with bandages for faces, and limbs tied to splints like broken puppets. Some didn't come back at all, some came back without ever really coming back, if you know what I mean. But orders are orders. The battalion is scheduled for an assault. The objective? A machine gun nest in a ruined farmhouse about 200 yards out. 200 yards doesn't sound like much until you're standing at the parapet, waiting for that second whistle. 200 yards becomes the longest distance in the world when it's filled with barbed wire, craters, snipers, and the smell of burnt men. You're handed a fresh magazine for your rifle, 4 grenades, and a strip of cloth to tie around your sleeve so command can tell who's dead and who's just pretending. You stuff everything into your pouches with trembling hands. McAllister slaps your shoulder and grins like a lunatic. Don't worry, mate. They always shoot me first. I'm too handsome. Dixon doesn't speak at all. He just wipes his glasses, smears mud across both lenses, and puts them back on raw and crooked. You climb the ladder slowly, boots scraping the rungs. The sky is still half dark, a bruised blue turning lighter by the second. The air smells like cordite, iron, and damp wool. Your heart beats so loud you're sure the enemy can hear it. And then the second whistle. You go. The moment your head clears the parapet, everything changes. You're not walking anymore. You're running, stumbling across broken ground that grabs at your ankles and threatens to pull you under. The mud sucks your boots down with every step, and barbed wire snarls at your shins like it's alive. You leap over a crater, land hard, and keep moving. Gunfire cracks from the farmhouse ahead. You see the flicker of muzzle flashes, hear the distinct tat-tat-tat of the MG-08, German Maxim gun. That's your target. That's what's turning men into red mist all around you. You pass a body face down in a shell hole, one arm sticking straight up, fingers curled. You don't look too long, you can't. A shell explodes 10 feet away. The ground lifts and slaps you sideways. You hit the dirt, ears ringing, mouth full of soil, heart hammering in your ribs like a trapped bird. Someone screams. You don't know who. You push yourself up, your leg hurts, but it bends, so you keep going. You find yourself behind a shattered tree stump, breathing hard. Dixon appears beside you, covered in mud and blood, though you don't think any of it's his. "Lovely weather for a jog," he gasps. You nod, then peek around the stump. Bad idea. A bullet whizzes past your cheek. You duck back instantly. Grenades. That's what you were told. Get close enough to the nest, then toss grenades in and hope the gunners are too busy dying to shoot back. It's a flawless plan, except for everything. You crawl forward on your belly now, rifle clutched in your gloved hands, barbed wire scraping your thighs. The mud is freezing, and you're pretty sure you've crushed someone's hand beneath your knee. You don't stop to confirm. You reach the last bit of cover, a shell crater big enough to fit 3 men. McAllister is already there, laughing again. "Knew you'd make it," he says. "You owe me a drink." "Make it through this, I'll buy you a pub," you mutter. You all nod at each other. It's time. You pull a grenade from your pouch. The pin is stiff. Your hand shakes. You breathe out, count to 3, and pull. The sound it makes is horribly casual, like opening a tin of peaches. You hurl it toward the machine gun nest and drop. The explosion is deafening. When you look up, smoke pours from the farmhouse ruin. The gun has gone silent. Someone shouts behind you, "Forward!" and you move again, heart in your throat, boots slip-upping on the blood-slick ground. You reach the nest. There's not much left, just smoke, rubble, and 2 German bodies in torn grey uniforms. One is still twitching. You lift your rifle, but someone else finishes it. You don't see who. The order comes to dig in, reinforce the position. You grab a shovel, start piling dirt into a makeshift barrier. Fingers numb, mind blank. You don't know how many made it. You don't ask. Historical fact, going over the top became infamous during the Great War, a euphemism for the moment when soldiers left their trenches and advanced into no man's land under enemy fire. Casualties were often catastrophic. On the first day of the Battle of the Somme, the British suffered over 57,000 casualties in a single morning. Commanders hoped sheer numbers would break enemy lines. Mostly they just fed more men to the guns. Fringe fact, some soldiers took Lucky Charms with them. Family photos, rabbit's feet, tiny Bibles. One man allegedly carried a lump of coal from his home fireplace. Another wore a lady's garter under his uniform, sent by his sweetheart. Superstition filled the gap where strategy often failed. The debate continues today. Were these assaults acts of bravery or senseless slaughter? Historians argue both. Some say the static nature of trench warfare forced such attacks. Others believe it was arrogance, an outdated view of glory that led men to die en masse for inches of dirt. You sit behind the broken wall of the farmhouse, legs trembling, chest heaving. You made it. You're alive. But some part of you didn't come with. You stare at your hands, coated in mud and something darker, and wonder how you're supposed to go back. The answer comes quietly. You don't. Not really. You wipe your palms on your coat and pick up your shovel. Night patrol is a different kind of terror. It doesn't scream like shellfire or shake the ground like a mortar blast. It whispers. It hides in fog, it waits. When you're sent out on night patrol, you're not just dodging bullets. You're sneaking through a graveyard where even your breath feels too loud, and the shadows all have sharp teeth. You get the orders just after dusk. Hughes calls your name, along with McAllister and a new lad named Reggie, short for Reginald, not that anyone calls him that. He's got baby cheeks and a nervous twitch in his jaw like he's chewing on a secret. You're all handed wire cutters, a few grenades and rifles already loaded. Hughes gives you a tight-lipped nod. You're out for reconnaissance. Don't shoot unless you've got no choice. And for God's sake, stay low. You nod. No one says much. There's no pep talk, just a quiet exchange of glances, that heavy feeling in your gut like your body already knows you're doing something stupid. The moon is out, of course, full and bright, like a spotlight you didn't ask for. Clouds drift in and out, giving you just enough cover to be hopeful, but not enough to relax. You pull your scarf up over your nose and step over the parapet. The mud sucks at your boots immediately, and you try not to think about how loud every step sounds. The trench disappears behind you in seconds, swallowed by shadow. No man's land stretches ahead, uneven and silent. You crawl forward, belly flat, elbows scraping over broken earth and shattered boards. Barbed wire glints in patches like frozen spiderwebs. You grip your cutters and snip slowly, carefully, each click echoing in your ears like gunfire. Reggie breathes too loudly. McAllister whispers, "Steady, lad, in through the nose, out through the don't get us killed." You move in short bursts, stop, listen, move again. The ground here is torn and pitted, shell holes filled with water, gear half buried, sometimes body parts. You pass a boot with a foot still inside, a rifle snapped clean in two, and what might be a helmet or might just be a dented pot. You don't stop to look closely. Halfway out you freeze. A noise, a soft shuffle ahead. Too deliberate to be wind, too slow to be a rat. You press your body into the mud and hold your breath. McAllister crawls up beside you, motions with 2 fingers. Enemy patrol. You hear them now. German voices, low murmuring, just ahead and moving from right to left. 3, maybe 4 men, close. One coughs, another laughs. You wait, unmoving, until their voices fade into the dark. When the silence returns, it's thicker than before. Reggie's shaking. You can see it in the way his shoulders twitch, the slight rattle of his gear. You lean in close, whisper, "You good?" He nods too quickly. Yeah, just cold." He's not cold, he's terrified. You are too, but there's no time for that. You reach the far edge of your patrol zone, a slight rise in the ground where a rusted field gun lies half swallowed by dirt. You're to make a quick sketch, note enemy positions and, if possible, cut a few feet of wire to bring back. Proof that you were here, as if the mud in your lungs wouldn't be enough. You pull out your notebook, sketch by candlelight filtered through a handkerchief. 2 minutes, maybe 3, then it's time to go. That's when the flare goes up. Green light explodes overhead, washing everything in ghostly colour. The shadows vanish. You're exposed. Every crater, every movement suddenly visible. "Down!" McAllister hisses. You flatten yourself into the dirt. The world holds its breath. A rifle cracks in the distance. Another flare, this one white, rises on the German side. A signal. You know what comes next. You scramble back, heart pounding. You hear shouts, footsteps. the unmistakable bark of a machine gun winding up. Tracers slice through the dark, carving hot lines across your path. You duck into a crater, mud slapping your face, and check for the others. McAllister dives in beside you, coughing. Reggie doesn't. You peer out. He's still on the flat ground, frozen like a deer in the road. You hiss, "Reggie, move!" He doesn't. A crack. Reggie falls. No scream, just a crumple. You move without thinking, crawl to him under fire, grab his collar, drag him 2 feet before you feel the tear. His legs hit. Bad. Blood pours into the mud like it's trying to replace the rain. McAllister reaches you. The two of you haul him back, 1 foot at a time, dodging bullets and stumbling over wire. It feels like hours. It's 10 minutes. When you reach the trench, hands pull you in. Reggie is lifted onto a stretcher. He's conscious, barely. He grips your sleeve, his voice small. "Tell Mum I'm okay." You lie. "Course!" The stretcher team disappears. You sit with McAllister in the dugout, both of you soaked and shaking. You don't speak for a while. Eventually he passes you his last cigarette. You light it with trembling hands. Historical fact: night patrols were among the most dangerous assignments in trench warfare. Done in total darkness, often with minimal support, these missions aimed to gather intelligence, sabotage wire, or simply confirm the enemy's position. Casualty rates were high. Morale dipped every time the order came, and yet they were necessary. Fringe fact: some soldiers tied bits of cloth or padding to their boots to move more quietly. Stealth socks, if you will. Others smeared mud on their faces, not for camouflage, but because they believed it made them less visible to snipers. It didn't, but rituals are rituals. There's an ongoing debate among historians about the value of these night operations. Some argue they were essential for keeping the enemy off balance, preventing surprise attacks. Others see them as costly, near-pointless missions that yielded little intelligence and only served to drain morale. The truth likely lives somewhere in the middle, like most things in war. As dawn breaks, you sit with your back to the trench wall, eyes wide open, cigarette gone cold in your hand. You don't remember falling asleep, but when you wake, your legs are numb and the mud has dried on your face like a second skin. You made it, but Reggie might not. And tomorrow it could be you lying out there in the moonlight, waiting for someone else to drag you home. You smell it before you see it. A sharp, oily stink that catches in the back of your throat like burnt onions mixed with metal and something far more sinister. You've heard about it. Everyone has. But this is the first time you've caught a whiff of it in the open air, drifting lazily across the trench line like a toxic breeze. Someone nearby mutters the word you're already thinking. Gas. It spreads fast. There's no explosion, no warning whistle, just a sudden green-yellow cloud that rolls in low, curling through the trench like it's hunting. Your brain stutters. For a second you can't move. Then instinct kicks in. "Masks!" someone bellows. You fumble for yours, hands clumsy with panic. The gas mask is stuffed in your satchel, tucked into its canvas case like a coiled snake. You yank it out, struggle with the straps, nearly drop it. Your heart is a hammer in your chest. By the time you get it over your face, your hands are shaking so hard you can't tighten the seal. A breath sneaks in. You cough once, hard. The mask stinks, rubber, charcoal, sweat. The eye lenses are already fogging. You pull the straps tighter and breathe shallow through your mouthpiece, a ragged rhythm you can barely control. The others are doing the same, men scrambling, yanking on gear, bumping into each other in blind panic. Reggie's not here. He's still in the infirmary, leg wrapped up, probably doped on morphine. Small mercy. The gas keeps coming. It seeps through the trench like water, turning corners, hugging the ground. It's heavier than air, so it stays low. If you're standing, you're already wrong. You crouch against the wall, pressing yourself into the mud, eyes squinting through the blurry haze of your mask. Your lungs burn, even through the filter. You've heard the horror stories, men coughing up chunks of their own throat, gas seeping through skin, blindness that comes without pain. Some gas kills quick, some kills slow, some waits days before it shows you what it's done. You don't want to know which one this is. Gas wasn't part of the plan, not when the war started. It arrived like everything else in this cursed conflict, slowly and then all at once. At first it was just chlorine, a choking fog that made your lungs seize. Then came phosgene, sneakier, deadlier, and now mustard gas, the worst of all. It doesn't kill instantly, it seeps into your clothes, your boots, your skin. burns everything it touches, and it lingers for days. It doesn't care about front lines or flags, it just sits and waits. You spot a man further down the trench without a mask. He's clawing at his throat, eyes red, spitting foam. Another soldier drags him into a dugout, but it's too late. You can see it in his face. He won't be right again, even if he lives. Someone throws a wet towel over a periscope lens, trying to block the cloud's advance. Another guy pisses on a rag and ties it around his face, an old trick from the early gas attacks, back before masks were standard issue. It still works, sort of. You've done it once yourself, doesn't make it less disgusting. The gas begins to clear after what feels like a lifetime. The wind finally shifts, pushing the cloud back toward the German lines. You stay masked a while longer, just in case. Some gases hang around like bad memories. Eventually, the all-clear whistle shrieks out, a different tone from the others, but everyone knows what it means. You peel off the mask, your face slick with sweat. The air tastes strange, metallic and wrong. You cough once, then again, harder. Your chest aches like it's full of nails. McAllister is sitting beside you, pulling his mask off slowly like he's afraid of what's underneath. That, he says, was absolute piss. You nod. Can't find words, just cough it again and try to keep the bile down. Historical fact. Gas attacks began in earnest in 1915, when the Germans released over 150 tons of chlorine gas at Ypres. Thousands died in minutes, most without even knowing what hit them. The British and French scrambled to respond, developing rudimentary masks that evolved over time. Charcoal filters, rubber seals, goggles, and eventually full-head designs. But nothing was perfect. Gas was a weapon that made the earth itself your enemy. Fringe fact, some soldiers carried birds, canaries or pigeons, not for messages, but as living alarms. If the bird stopped singing or dropped dead, it meant gas was in the air. A grim but oddly poetic system, like something out of a fable you'd rather not be living in. Scholars still argue whether gas was ever truly effective. Tactically, it rarely achieved breakthroughs. Soldiers adapted quickly and protective gear improved. But as a psychological weapon, devastating. It wasn't just the fear of death, it was the fear of how you might die. Drowning in your own lungs, blistered to blindness, slowly rotting from the inside out. Gas didn't just kill, it haunted. Back in the trench, the routine resumes like nothing happened. You're told to refill sandbags. Someone cracks a joke about mustard gas making the stew smell better. You laugh weakly. It's all you can do. Later, Hughes passes around a small flask. You take a swig, whatever's in it burning like justice down your throat. No one mentions the coughing fits, or the guy still curled up in the corner, eyes swollen shut. You all pretend it's fine. That night you dream of green clouds and burning lungs. You wake with your heart racing and mud in your mouth. You wipe your face and lie back down. The wind's still shifting. You lose your left sock to trench foot. Just the sock for now, but your toes are flirting with disaster. It starts with a numbness you can't shake. Then comes the swelling. By the time you peel off your boot, and it does feel like peeling, you're looking at something that no longer belongs to your body. Your foot is pale, bloated, the skin wrinkled and soft like it's been soaking in a tub for hours. Only there's no tub, and definitely no bath salts. Just cold, foul water and the permanent squelch of your own personal hell. Hughes takes one look and mutters, "You're halfway to amputation." He's not joking, not even close. You've seen it happen. Men waking up with black toes, the skin sloughing off like old paint. Medics doing their best to save what's left, but usually just breaking out the bone saw instead. A clean cut is better than infection that crawls its way up the leg, whispering rot. You're sent to the dressing station a few trenches back, nothing fancy, just a half-roofed lean-to covered in tarp and smelling strongly of iodine, urine and old sweat. The medic there is a Scotsman named Weir, who looks like he hasn't slept since the war began. He doesn't flinch when he sees your foot, just grunts, nods, and starts pulling out tools. He scrubs the skin raw. You hiss and clench your fists, but he keeps going, mumbling something about circulation and tissue salvage. It's like having fire dragged across your bones. He wraps it in gauze soaked with some sort of antiseptic that smells worse than the trench. Then he hands you a tin of whale oil and says, "Use it every day or I'll take the foot next week, understood?" You understand. You limp back to your section, favouring your right leg and praying to whoever's listening that you can keep the left. When you slide into the dugout, Dixon offers you a half biscuit and nods toward your boots. "They eat you yet?" Not quite, you say, sinking onto your crate, but they're working on it. Trench foot is common. Everyone's got it or had it, or is about to get it. The only defence is vigilance. Change your socks twice a day, rub your feet with oil, never let your boots stay wet. Which is hilarious, since nothing ever dries. Not here, not ever. You've taken to wearing your spare pair of socks around your neck, letting your body heat do the work. It's not much, but it helps. The worst part isn't even the pain, it's the smell. Once rot sets in, you can smell it. Not from your feet, from your mates. And no one says anything because that would mean acknowledging it. You just breathe through your mouth and pretend it's the stew again. You see worse cases each day. One lad had his heel turn black and start to separate from the skin like old wallpaper. He didn't notice until he tried to run during a shelling and couldn't. Collapsed mid-step. Carried off screaming. No one's seen him since. Probably in a field hospital somewhere, footless and bitter. Historical fact. Trench foot affected tens of thousands during World War I, particularly in the early years when the conditions were at their worst and knowledge about prevention was still spreading. It was caused by prolonged exposure to damp, unsanitary and cold conditions. It could lead to gangrene and ultimately amputation if not treated. By 1916, prevention became a military priority. Daily inspections, issued whale oil, dry socks for yucks, foot drills. Commanders were told to treat foot care as seriously as weapon care. Fringe fact: in one regiment, soldiers were issued what they called toe tags. Not the death kind, but literal fabric loops they tied around their toes to help circulation and remind them to wiggle their digits. Others tried dancing in place, squatting every half hour, even stuffing their boots with old newspaper to absorb moisture. One bloke tied a string between both big toes and tugged on it every hour like some kind of insane foot alarm. Whatever worked. There's debate about how many amputations could have been avoided with better supplies, more dry socks, improved boots, proper flooring in the trenches. Some historians argue trench foot was less a medical inevitability and more a logistical failure. The army adapted, but slowly. Too slowly for some. Back in the trench, you've got a new ritual now. Every morning, peel off socks, scrub your feet with a rag, apply whale oil, air them out for 10 minutes, pray to the gods of dry cotton. Your trench mates tease you, but they do the same when they think no one's watching. Even McAllister, who once bragged that his feet could kick through time, has started following the routine. The foot doesn't lie. One evening, as you're airing out your left foot, a rat scurries past and stops to sniff your sock. You glare at it. It glares back. You reach for your bayonet. It wisely retreats. Small victories. The rest of your day is spent reinforcing the parapet, shoveling mud and hauling new sandbags into position. The work is hard and dull and blessedly distracting. You forget about your foot for a while until you slip on a duckboard and jam your heel into a corner post. The pain sends stars across your vision. You bite your tongue and keep going. No choice. Never any choice. Later you sit beside Dixon watching the sky darken to ash. A few men are playing cards under a flickering lantern. Someone hums an off-key song about whiskey and girls in Kilkenny. You can almost pretend you're not surrounded by rot. Almost. You look down at your foot, now bandaged and aching, and you whisper, "Don't you dare fall off." And it listens, at least for tonight. It begins with silence. Not the uneasy hush before shellfire, not the strained pause between whistle blasts, but a strange, pure stillness, so foreign it feels wrong. It's early morning and you're on the fire step with your rifle cradled loosely in your arms. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, just a faint line of pale gold threading along the eastern edge of the sky. You expect the usual. Birdsong swallowed by artillery, someone cursing about breakfast, the sharp snap of distant rifle fire. But none of that comes. There's just quiet. You glance down the trench. Dixon is leaning against the wall, his eyes closed. Not asleep, just still. McAllister is humming something under his breath, but stops halfway through a line. Even the rats have gone somewhere else. You look across no man's land, and for the first time in months you see it. Clear of smoke, soft with frost, eerie in its emptiness. The barbed wire shimmers with ice. Craters are filled with frozen water, smooth as glass. There are shapes in the mist, but they don't move. You're about to say something when Hughes arrives, unusually calm, holding a slip of paper. He reads it aloud in a voice that's barely louder than a whisper. "No fire before midday. Orders from command. Germans agreed to." You blink. What? Christmas, he says. At least for a few hours. It doesn't make sense at first. See, you're too used to the war twisting even kindness into cruelty. But it's real. The rumours started 2 days ago. Whispers that the enemy might hold fire on Christmas morning. And now it's happening. You shift uneasily, watching the German line. No movement. Then singing. At first it's soft, almost uncertain. A voice carrying across no man's land like fog. Then another joins it. You can't understand the words, but the melody is unmistakable. Stille Nacht. Silent night, Dixon whispers. Your side is quiet, stunned. Then someone, probably Mad Mac, starts singing along in English, loud and off-key. Another joins him, then another. Within minutes, both sides are singing in 2 languages, 2 trenches full of tired, filthy men trading verses over the same dead ground. It's surreal. Someone stands on their side, no gunfire, no shouting. Then another man stands, and another. Soon figures are emerging from the trenches, unarmed, hands raised. Some carry white flags made from scraps of shirt. Others hold small trees decorated with tins and string. Hughes looks to you. Stay down if you want. No shame in it. But you're already climbing the ladder. Heart pounding, not with fear this time, but disbelief. Cold air hits your face as you step into no man's land. You move slowly, boots crunching the frost, eyes flicking side to side. Dozens of others are doing the same, from both sides converging in the middle like ghosts at a reunion. And then you're face to face with the enemy. A young man in a coal-scuffed grey uniform, probably no older than you. He smiles, nods, offers his hand. You shake it. His grip is firm, human, warm despite the cold. He says something in German, quick, friendly. You don't understand, but you nod anyway. He points to your helmet, chuckles, and pulls a cigarette from his pocket and offers it. You take it, light it with trembling fingers. The smoke tastes like something from a dream. All around, the impossible unfolds. Men trading chocolate, photographs, buttons, pieces of kit. One group starts a game of football with a tin can. No goals, no rules, just laughter and chaos. Someone finds a harmonica. It squeaks a broken tune, and a small crowd claps along. For a moment, war disappears. Historical fact. The Christmas truce of 1914 was a spontaneous, unofficial ceasefire along parts of the Western Front. British and German soldiers left their trenches, met in no man's land, exchanged gifts, sang carols and buried the dead. In some sectors, the peace lasted days. In others, only hours. But it happened, despite orders, despite bloodshed, despite everything. Fringe fact. A few soldiers used the truce to retrieve mail dropped earlier by messengers too scared to cross open ground. One British private reportedly found a lost love letter, still sealed, and read it aloud to a German soldier who laughed and asked if she had a sister. Of course the truce wasn't universal. Some officers forbade it. Some areas saw continued fighting, and in many places the war returned with brutal swiftness the next day. But in your trench this morning it's real. You sit beside your German counterpart sharing stories neither of you fully understand. He shows you a photo of his family, a baby, a wife, a dog. You nod, show him your sister's last letter. He points at the signature and smiles. You both understand that. A nearby soldier hands you a small cake, misshapen and lumpy, but delicious. You offer part of your last biscuit in return. It feels like a fair trade. Dixon appears with 2 mugs of tea, gestures to your new friend and raises his in a mock toast. The German raises his as well, grinning like a schoolboy. The moment stretches, golden and fragile. You forget the mud, the shells, the cold, you forget your aching foot, your worn-out coat, the gas mask hanging from your belt. All you know is that for one absurd, beautiful morning, peace has broken through. And then, from far down the line, a rifle cracks. One shot, everyone freezes. Another shot. The magic wavers. Some men start backing away. A whistle blows, harsh, urgent. Hughes shouts, "Back to the trench now!" You grip your new friend's hand one last time. He says something, soft and fast. You nod again, then you turn and run. Back into the mud, back into the war, and you climb down just as another shell screams overhead. The spell is broken, but for the rest of your life you'll remember that morning. When enemies became people. When war stopped. Just long enough to matter. Getting pulled back from the front line is like stepping out of a fever dream. You don't realise how deep you were in it until you're on the other side, standing in cleanish socks, clutching a hot drink that doesn't taste like rust, and staring at a real bed, even if it's just a straw-stuffed sack under a leaky canvas tent. Your boots are still damp, your coat still smells like misery, but you're off the line. For now, the sergeant calls it a rest period. No one really rests, but the word alone makes you feel lighter. You're trucked back a few miles, bumping along cratered roads in a rickety Bedford lorry that sounds like it's dying with every gear change. You don't even sit, just lean into the pack of bodies around you, crammed shoulder to shoulder, knees knocking, trying not to breathe too deeply. Everyone stinks, no one cares. You arrive at a support camp just far enough from the action that the guns are background noise instead of an earthquake. It's a mess of tents, wooden huts and fire pits belching smoke into the morning air. It smells better. Still smoke and wet wool, but with hints of coffee, tobacco, even cooked meat if you sniff optimistically. First thing they give you is food, not a biscuit, not bully beef, a real meal, stew with chunks, bread that's still soft in the middle, and tea that doesn't come with weevils or regret. You sit cross-legged with your mess tin on your lap and don't speak. You just eat slowly, letting each bite convince you you're still alive. After food comes the holy grail, hygiene. You're led to a makeshift wash station with wooden stalls and barrels of cold water. Soap, actual soap, is handed out like gold. You scrub your face, your hands, your armpits. You dunk your head and feel the grit run off your scalp in dark rivulets. Your fingers wrinkle from the water. You haven't been this clean in months. Then it's kit inspection, gear check, weapon maintenance. Routine stuff, but almost pleasant in its normalcy. You get a fresh uniform, stiff, itchy, and gloriously uninfested. You burn your old socks in a tin bucket and watch the lice snap and pop in the flames, like tiny demons being exorcised. Dixon salutes the fire. To better days, he says, grinning. Later, you're free to explore the camp. There's a YMCA tent. Yes, that YMCA. Where you can write letters, read newspapers, play a cracked piano missing 2 keys. You scribble a quick note to your sister, tell her you're safe for now, that the food's decent and that someone played Pack Up Your Troubles so poorly on the piano it actually made people cry. There's even a canteen that sells beer, warm, watery stuff poured into dented mugs, but it tastes like heaven. You sit outside with your mates, sipping slowly, letting the fire pit warm your boots. McAllister tells a story about the time he got drunk and proposed to a scarecrow. You're pretty sure he's lying, but you let him have it. Laughter is medicine. And then there's the other side of the rear, the parts you're not supposed to talk about. But everyone knows. Brothels, set up just outside camp in repurposed farmhouses or tents draped with faded sheets. Officially discouraged, unofficially tolerated. Some lads go, some don't. You're not sure how you feel about it, but you don't judge. Everyone's starving for something, comfort, a ski, even just the illusion of touch. You don't go. Instead, you walk the edge of camp until you find a tree. The first real tree you've seen in weeks. It's nothing special, just bare branches, a trunk full of knots, but it's alive. You sit beneath it, pull out a cigarette someone traded you for half a tin of jam and smoke until the stars blink out. Historical fact, soldiers rotated in and out of the front line on a semi-regular basis. A common cycle was 4 days on the line, 4 days in reserve, and 4 days in rest areas. In reality, this varied wildly depending on conditions and manpower. Rear camps provided food, bathing facilities, entertainment, and medical attention. For many, it was the only chance to recover any sense of humanity. Fringe fact. In some rest camps, soldiers formed full-on theatre troupes. Men in wigs and makeup performed plays, Shakespeare, comedies, even musicals for their mates. One famous group, the Dumbbells, started in the Canadian Forces and later toured internationally after the war. Nothing says morale like seeing your sergeant play Juliet in a borrowed dress and fake lashes. The scholars are divided on the rear's psychological impact. Some argue these breaks kept soldiers sane, gave them just enough hope to keep going. Others suggest the contrast, mud to music hall, trench stew to roast beef, was emotionally disorienting, even cruel. To be reminded of what normal looked like, only to have it ripped away again. You feel both. You lie in your tent that night, wrapped in a dry blanket, the ground underneath only slightly lumpy. You stare at the canvas above, lit faintly by the fire outside, and you feel strange, not happy, not safe, just disoriented. Like your body's here, but your brains still in the trench, waiting for the next shell to fall. You close your eyes and you're back on the fire step, boots soaked, finger on the trigger. You open them and the fire crackles softly. Someone's snoring. You're not home, but for now you're not at war either. Just between. A breath, a blink and a borrowed day. The problem with rest is that it makes you soft. Go. Not in your body. Your muscles are still sore, your back still aches, and your feet will never be the same. But in your mind. A few days of warm food, dry socks and no explosions, and you start to remember what it feels like to be human. And that's dangerous. Because soon enough they send you back. Always. And when they do, it's worse than the first time. Because now you know. You get the orders on a grey morning, the sky already spitting rain before you've finished breakfast. Everyone goes quiet. The sergeant doesn't even need to say it. One look at his face and you know you're headed back up, back to the line. You repack your gear in silence, roll up your blanket, check your ammo, fill your canteen. Dixon tries to joke, says he's forgotten how to march in mud. No one laughs. Even McAllister's grin is thin. Reggie's still laid up with that leg wound. Lucky in a twisted way. You envy him more than you'd admit. The trucks take you most of the way, rattling over shell-pocked roads while the wind whips at your coat. Then it's on foot, marching in staggered lines through narrow paths lit only by the occasional flash of artillery in the distance. The closer you get, the more everything shrinks. Your voice, your vision, your sense of control. By the time you see the first stretch of barbed wire, your guts are not of old dread. The trench greets you like an old bully, familiar, ugly, and indifferent to your feelings. The walls sag even more than you remember. The boards have warped into useless waves, and the dugout you once slept in has a new ceiling leak. Same rats though, probably with grandchildren by now. There's no adjustment period. Within hours you're back in rotation, watch duty, wiring parties and latrine maintenance, because of course the latrines collapsed while you were gone. You're digging a new one before you've even unpacked fully. Welcome home. And that's when you notice something new. A name, whispered down the line like gossip with teeth. Dawson, young lad from C Company. Good shot, better card player. Didn't come back from a night patrol, but he's not listed as missing. Or dead. He's listed as AWOL. Absent without leave. Which means one thing, someone thinks he ran. You don't want to believe it. You remember Dawson, sharp eyes, never missed a flare. Always passed you his extra sugar when you were on watch together. He wasn't the type. Then again, everyone's the type once they've had enough. The talk starts simple. Maybe he got lost. Maybe the Germans took him. But then someone claims he was spotted walking away from the front, gear ditched, rifle left behind, just walking like he'd finally decided the war wasn't worth his skin. 2 days later, he's caught. Found hiding in a barn 6 miles south, curled up behind hay bales, his uniform stained with fear and desperation. They bring him back under guard. No one says anything as he's marched past. He doesn't look up, just stares at the ground like it might forgive him. The officers set up a hearing. Not a trial, nothing so formal. Just enough of a process to look official before they hand down the sentence. Cowardice, desertion, maximum penalty. The firing squad is assembled 3 days later. They don't tell you who's in it, but you know. You see the way a few of the lads start smoking more than usual. The way Hughes clenches his jaw when he thinks no one's watching. You'd swear Dixon's hands shake for the first time ever. The execution happens at dawn. You don't see it, but you hear the shots. 6 cracks, then silence. Then business as usual. Historical fact, over 300 British soldiers were executed for military offences during World War I, most commonly for desertion or cowardice. Many of them were suffering from undiagnosed shell shock or severe trauma. Some had simply reached their breaking point. In the decades since, these executions have been widely criticised, with some posthumously pardoned. Fringe fact, some men chosen for firing squads intentionally aimed away, firing into the ground or sky to avoid taking a life. Others were given blank cartridges so no one would know whose bullet had killed the condemned. It was a way to preserve just a sliver of humanity in a system built to erase it. The debate still rages. Were these executions necessary to maintain discipline in the face of unimaginable conditions? Or were they the ultimate betrayal of soldiers who gave everything they could until they simply couldn't anymore? There's no easy answer. Only graves marked with numbers and names whispered when the wind blows just right. That evening you sit with your back against the trench wall staring at nothing. Dixon finally speaks. He was just a kid. Yes, or... You nod. We all are. There's no justice here. Not really. Just rules, orders, protocol. Protocol? Words used to mask the truth, that sometimes the strongest men are the ones who say, I can't. You look down at your boots. They're caked in mud again. Blood, maybe. It's hard to tell anymore. You stand, you stretch, you pick up your rifle, and you go back to work. Because you have to. It's always the same sound, a whistle, a thud, then the scream. Sometimes the scream comes first, sometimes it never comes at all. Today it's the second kind. You're up on the fire step just minutes after breakfast thinking about how bad the tea was. Too bitter, not enough sugar. When the mortar lands. You don't hear it coming. That's the trouble with some of them, silent until they aren't. One moment you're watching the horizon shift in the fog, and the next, the trench behind you is rubble. The dugout's gone. 2 lads with it. You're already moving, scrambling down the step, rifle abandoned behind you, hands shaking as you duck behind a reinforced corner. Another thud. Closer. Someone's shouting, but it doesn't register. You blink through the dirt and smoke, ears ringing, and find yourself kneeling beside a man, can't even tell who, clutching at the side of his neck. Blood sprays in time with his heartbeat, a rhythm you can't unsee. Medic! You shout, voice cracking. Medic! No one comes, not yet. So you press your hand to the wound. It's wet, warm, sticky. The man, boy really, gasps and claws at your sleeve. You lie to him, tell him he's fine. Help is coming. You're just trying to stop the bleeding, trying to remember what they told you back in training. Apply pressure, keep them calm, tilt the head. No, wait, don't tilt the head if it's a neck wound. Or was that only for head wounds? Too late. He goes still, just like that. You stare at his face for a second, long enough to wonder his name, then look away. You can't afford to carry another one right now. And then finally the stretcher bearers arrive. You know one of them. Evans, a small Welshman with quiet eyes and cracked fingernails. He doesn't flinch as he steps over the rubble, scanning for survivors. Here! You shout, pointing to another man groaning under a collapsed plank. Evans waves over his partner, and together they work fast. You watch in a daze as they triage. This one lives, this one doesn't. They don't say it aloud, but you see it in their faces. A glance, a sigh, a skipped body. It's math. Cruel, necessary math. One of the lads, Sutton, is missing most of his arm. He's still conscious somehow, mumbling something about his mum's lemon pie. You try not to gag as Evans unrolls a tourniquet and cinches it tight around the shredded stump. The bleeding slows. Sutton passes out. They lift him onto the stretcher, strap him in and run. Evans doesn't look back. By mid-morning you're covered in blood that isn't yours. You sit in a crater with Dixon and sip cold tea from a dented tin. It tastes the same as before. You almost laugh. That's the 4th hit this week, Dixon mutters. You'd think we'd be due for a miss. You nod, but your eyes keep drifting to the corner where the boy with the neck wound had been. He's gone now. Nothing left but a patch of dark earth. You've seen worse. You keep telling yourself that. You've seen worse. But today it sits heavier. Historical fact. Stretcher bearers were among the unsung heroes of the Great War. Often volunteers with little to no medical training, they moved through fire zones to carry the wounded back to aid stations. Each team of 2 would lug bodies through mud over barbed wire under gunfire. Many didn't carry weapons, some didn't survive long. Fringe fact, in one unit, stretcher bearers would place a playing card, usually a joker, on a wounded soldier's chest if he was beyond saving. Not official protocol, just their way of saying this one's done. 1 joker per man, and when they ran out they made new ones out of torn ration cards. The ethics of battlefield triage are still debated. How do you decide who gets saved? Who gets left? In the chaos, medics had seconds to choose, based on wounds, breath sounds, responsiveness. Some survived against the odds, others died waiting. But the real weight wasn't in the medical books. It was in the moment when you looked into a man's eyes and decided he wasn't worth the bandage. You see Evans again later, sitting against the trench wall, arms streaked red to the elbows. He's holding a cigarette that's burned halfway down without ever being smoked. You offer him your last match. He nods thanks, doesn't light it. Lost 5, he mutters. Saved 3, 1's still screaming. You don't say anything, you just sit beside him. The night brings more wounded. Another barrage, more screaming. Someone calls out for their brother, another for God. You help where you can. Hold hands, mop brows, keep pressure on wounds until the medics can get there. You've stopped thinking about your own safety. You don't even flinch when the trench shakes. You're just another pair of hands now, another body keeping someone else alive, and sometimes that's enough. At dawn you find Evans asleep on a folded blanket. His boots are off, his feet are cracked and raw. You lay a spare coat over him and let him sleep. He's earned it. You all have, but the next whistle is coming. It always is. The letter doesn't come. You check every day, twice if you can, lingering near the makeshift post drop like it's a well in the desert. You hover when the mail runner arrives, pretending to be casual, like you just happen to be nearby with absolutely nothing better to do than loiter around a pile of damp envelopes and hopeful eyes. But your name isn't called. Not Monday, not Tuesday, not today. At first you tell yourself it's just slow delivery. Rain's been constant. The roads are a mess. Maybe a bridge got shelled. Maybe a wagon overturned. Mail gets lost all the time. You've seen letters arrive weeks late, stained and folded like they were dug out of someone's boot. There are plenty of reasons, logical ones, rational ones. But then the doubt creeps in, tiny, persistent, like trench lice for the soul. What if it's not the post? What if they've stopped writing? You remember your sister's last line from the last letter. Write back soon. We worry when we don't hear from you. That was 2 weeks ago. You wrote back, of course. Told her you were safe, that the food had improved, a lie. That the weather was warming up, also a lie. That morale was high, colossal lie. You even drew a cartoon in the corner of Dixon kicking a rat into a sandbag. It felt silly but necessary. Something to make her smile. Now you start to wonder if maybe that letter never made it. Or maybe it did and something was in it, something that scared her, something that sounded too much like the truth. Or maybe she's sick. Maybe she's been drafted into endless shifts at the munitions factory. Maybe she's fine. And you're just imagining things because you've spent too many nights staring at the dugout ceiling, counting mould spots like they might align into constellations and point you toward home. You try not to let it show, but Dixon notices. He always does. No letter, he asks one morning, chewing a crust of biscuit so hard it might shatter his teeth. You shake your head. Same here, he says. Maybe they're having too much fun without us. Maybe they forgot us, you mutter, quieter than intended. He raises an eyebrow but doesn't argue, just tosses you the rest of his biscuit and says, Here, something to chew on while you spiral. You force a smile, but it doesn't stick. Later that night, a lad named Foster gets a package. He opens it like it's Christmas morning, which, in this place, it might as well be. There's a knitted scarf, a tin of boiled sweets, and a postcard with a painted landscape. Trees and hills and blue sky that feels like fantasy. He shows everyone. You're happy for him? Truly. But deep down, it feels like someone's pressing a cold coin into your chest. That night you try writing anyway, just in case. You scribble down whatever you can manage, that you're well, not true, that you're warm, laughably false, that Dixon's still alive and still can't cook, accurate. You leave out the part about the medic who bled out beside you last night. You leave out the smell that lingers on your hands even after you wash. You sign it, with love, always. Then pause, cross out always, rewrite it, then crumple the page, start again. Historical fact, during WWI, over 2 billion letters and 114 million parcels were sent through the British Army Postal Service. The delivery system was an astonishing logistical feat, often getting letters to the front lines within days, even through mud, chaos and artillery. Mail became one of the most vital morale lifelines for troops. Connection, memory, hope, all folded into a single envelope. Fringe fact, some soldiers included coded messages in their letters, slipping past censors by using inside jokes or innocuous-looking phrases that actually meant something to loved ones. One man used the phrase, "Tell Aunt Nellie the onions are ready," to signal a movement of his unit. If Aunt Nellie had actually existed, she probably would have been very confused. But not every letter made it. Some were lost in bombings, some were destroyed by weather, others, too raw, too dark, were intercepted by military censors. You know that. You've seen letters blacked out with thick ink, whole paragraphs swallowed by bureaucracy. Even in the age of total war, someone's job was to protect the home front from too much honesty. So you write carefully now, you keep it light, filtered. You describe the mud as adventurous, the rations as memorable, the trench as a bit crowded but cosy. You draw a cartoon of McAllister using his helmet as a soup bowl. Then you fold it, tuck it in an envelope, and pray it gets there. But the next mail call comes and goes. Still nothing. And now the silence feels deliberate, like a verdict. You imagine your sister holding your last letter, eyes scanning the lines and deciding not to answer. Maybe it's too hard for her. Maybe the war feels too far away, or worse, too close. Maybe she doesn't want to picture you here. Not like this. You get mean about it. Just for a minute. You imagine her laughing with friends, forgetting to even think about you. Too caught up in dances and picnics and safe, clean evenings. Then the guilt hits. You shake your head and whisper, "That's not fair," to no one. Because it isn't. Because you don't really want her to carry this weight. You just don't want to carry it alone. That night you dream about your childhood home. You're in the garden, bare feet in cool grass. Someone is calling your name. You turn, but you can't see their face. The dream slips away before you get to them. When you wake, the letter still isn't there. But you go check anyway, because hope dies slow. Survival earns you strange things out here, like stripes. You never ask for them, never expect them, and certainly don't feel proud when they're handed over. But after you've spent enough months not dying, enough nights freezing without complaint, and enough battles dragging the wounded instead of running for cover, someone up the chain decides you deserve a promotion. Just like that, you're a Lance Corporal. Congratulations. Here's a chevron stitched to your sleeve and an extra ration of guilt. It happens after a particularly grim stretch at the front. A week of rain, shelling, and that awful aimless waiting that breaks down your brain like slow acid. One night, a gas shell hits the neighbouring trench section. You help haul 4 men back to the aid station, your lungs burning, mask fogged, boots slipping in mud laced with things better left unexamined. Hughes sees you. He doesn't say anything at the time, just nods. 3 days later, he calls you over, scratches the back of his neck like he's got something in his teeth. "Command says you're due," he mutters, not meeting your eyes. "Told them you wouldn't run if hell opened up under your boots." You almost laugh, almost, but you just nod. "Thanks, I guess." He hands you the insignia patch. It's muddy. Of course it is. You sew it onto your sleeve that night, your hands shaking more than you want them to. McAllister watches from across the dugout. "Careful," he says. "That thing makes you about 50% more likely to get shot by your own men." He's joking, probably. The next morning everything feels different and exactly the same. You still lace up the same boots, eat the same stale biscuits, still duck when you hear the same shriek of incoming fire. But now when someone complains about trench rotation or blisters, or who gets the driest corner of the dugout, they look at you. Like you've been elected mayor of this muddy village of the damned. It's not power. It's paperwork and extra duty rosters. It's being the one who has to explain to the new lad why we don't whistle near the wire, or why you never stand too close to the latrine wall after rain. It's knowing who's got trench foot bad enough to need time off and who's faking just to catch an hour of dry socks and sleep. And it's worse than that, because now you're expected to pretend you believe the line is worth holding. Pretend you're sure about the orders. Pretend you don't wake up every night sweating, fists clenched, heart pounding because you dreamed you were back in no man's land with no helmet and no rifle. Leadership, they call it. Mostly it feels like babysitting a group of grown men who've seen too much and slept too little. Reggie's back on duty now, legs still stiff but moving. He follows you everywhere, eyes wide, waiting for orders. You try not to act like that makes you responsible for whether he lives or dies, but you feel it. Every time he peeks over the trench lip or steps too close to unexploded ordnance, you feel it. Dixon, of course, doesn't let the promotion change a thing. "Corporal," he says, exaggerating the word with a mock salute. "Permission to breathe, sir?" You throw a biscuit at his head. He eats it. But not everyone takes it so well. You catch a few sideways glances. One of the older lads mutters something about bloody children playing officer. You ignore it. Mostly historical fact. Field promotions during the Great War were often given out of necessity. Men died fast. Replacements came slower. Leadership roles trickled down through attrition more than merit. Some soldiers received ranks they never wanted, tasked with leading men into battle with less training than the men they commanded. Fringe fact? Some promoted soldiers refused to wear their stripes, sewing them inside their tunics to avoid being singled out. Not just by the enemy, who often targeted officers and NCOs first, but by their own, wary of the invisible wall that rank built between equals who once shared everything. There's a long-running debate in military history circles. Do battlefield promotions create true leaders, or just survivors with good luck and guilt? Some argue that natural authority rises through hardship. Others suggest it's mostly about who's still breathing when decisions need to be made. Out here, it's hard to say. Sometimes the loudest die first, sometimes the quiet ones stay. You don't feel like a leader. Not really. Just a man who's seen the wire from too many angles and figured out how to live with the sound of someone else's bones snapping. One night Hughes calls you over and hands you a small leather notebook. Keep notes, he says. Names, rations, weather. If we all get wiped, someone will want to know what happened. You nod. Take it. Write your name inside the front cover. Then stare at the first blank page like it's judging you. You start small. The date, the weather, drizzle again, a short list of who's still alive. You can't bring yourself to write the names of the dead yet. That'll come later. By the next morning, you're standing on the fire step giving watch assignments. It feels surreal, like pretending to be your old schoolmaster, only with fewer books and more grenades. Reggie's on your left. McAllister's across the trench playing cards with someone from another unit. Dixon's humming something that might be a hymn or might be a dirty pub song. Hard to tell. For a second, the world holds still. You forget the mud, the rats, the stench. Just men, waiting for the sun to rise. And then, as if the universe couldn't help itself, the first shell of the day hits 100 yards down the line. You flinch. Everyone does. But you don't duck. Not this time. You turn, check the faces, give a nod. Stay sharp, you say. Yeah. And they do. Because you told them to. The rumour begins with a whisper, passed down the trench like contraband, shared in low voices over tin mugs and half-lit cigarettes. It's coming, someone mutters. An armistice. Proper end to it all. You hear it from a lad in D Company first, then from a cook at the rear station. Then again from a runner whose boots are falling apart and whose eyes are too tired to lie. You don't believe it, of course. You've heard this kind of thing before. Back in May, some fool said the Germans were collapsing. In July, there was a drunken claim that the Kaiser had fled to Switzerland. Every time you let yourself hope, just a little, and every time the shelling reminded you that hope in the trenches was about as useful as dry socks in a flood. But this time it spreads differently. Even the officers look twitchy. You catch Hughes staring at a folded paper for longer than usual, lips pressed tight. He won't say anything, not directly, but when you ask if the rumours are true, he doesn't snap back. Just shrugs, like a man who spent too long hoping for the impossible. Command's saying things might move fast, he says, but until the ink's dry and the guns go quiet, you stay sharp. And so, of course, the very next morning they send you forward. Another push, another damned offensive that you want to scream. You want to ask what possible point there is in advancing now, if the war's ending any minute. But no one asks. No one dares. Orders are orders, and so you prepare like always. Check your gear, load your rifle, tie your helmet strap a little tighter than necessary because the ritual keeps your hands from shaking. This time it's a recon and hold mission. Take a ruined hamlet just beyond the ridge, somewhere that probably had a name once, now just a smear of broken brick and churned earth. Hold the position. Await further instruction. You lead the charge. The terrain is half frozen, the kind of brittle that crunches underfoot but still manages to suck at your boots like mud. You advance in staggered formation, eyes flicking between the cratered ground and the horizon. The fog is low and clinging, like it doesn't want to let go of the dead. Reggie moves beside you, limping but determined. McAllister flanks the other side, rifle up, eyes wide. Then the fire starts. It's quick, violent, chaotic. You duck behind a smashed wall, return fire toward a cluster of machine gun nests tucked into the ruins of what might have been a schoolhouse. Bullets zip past, whispering death. You see a lad from another unit go down, throat blooming red like a sudden flower. You bark orders, crouch, run, flank, toss a grenade into a basement window and feel the earth lurch as it explodes. It's pure muscle memory now. You think about the rumours, about armistice, about how you might die now, today, just days, maybe hours before this all ends. You feel the fury in your teeth. McAllister shouts something and points. You follow, storming a collapsed building with bayonets drawn. A German soldier is inside, too dazed to resist. He raises his hands. You don't fire, neither does he. You breathe, deep, then shout, "Clear!" And then it's over, just like that. You hold the ruins for 3 days. It's miserable, cold, sleepless. Constant shelling from behind you now, support fire moving up, artillery in the rear, not yet informed you've taken the target. You wave signal flags, fire flares. Nothing helps. 2 men die from friendly fire. You bury them behind the shattered churchyard wall. Historical fact. The 100 Days Offensive, the final campaign of World War I, saw rapid Allied advances in the fall of 1918. But even as peace talks progressed, the fighting didn't stop. Armistice negotiations moved slowly, and on both sides, commanders continued to order assaults, often with full knowledge that the war was nearing its conclusion. Thousands died in the final weeks and even hours before the ceasefire. Fringe fact? Some soldiers reported that in the final days, enemy troops deliberately missed their targets. One British unit claimed a German machine gunner fired short on purpose, letting them pass. Another swore they saw a German soldier wave them forward before vanishing into smoke. Stories like these are hard to confirm, but they linger, flickers of humanity as the clock ran out. Historians still debate whether these last-minute offensives were necessary. Some argue they applied the pressure needed to force the armistice. Others call them criminal, a waste of life in the name of posturing. One French general insisted on retaking a town so it could be listed in the victory dispatches. Hundreds died for that single mention. You sit behind the church wall sharing a cigarette with Reggie, who's down to a single working boot and a smile so thin it's practically a ghost. Dixon limps over, drops beside you, and passes a folded slip of paper. "Straight from command," he says. "They say it's real now, November 11th, 11 o'clock. You read the note, then read it again. It says the guns will fall silent. You can't quite believe it. The boys gather that night under the broken roof of a barn with half its wall blown out. Someone finds a tin of peaches. Someone else produces a tiny bottle of brandy, half full and still corked. You toast. You don't know what to say. You sleep with your rifle anyway, just in case. You wake up early on the morning of November 11th, before the sun rises, before the rats begin their morning sprints across the dugout beams, before even McAllister starts snoring again after his nightly gas-induced nightmare. The world is unusually still. It isn't peace, not yet, but the shape of it hangs in the air like fog before dawn. Everyone knows what today is. Everyone is pretending not to. The order was clear. Ceasefire at 11 o'clock sharp, not a minute before, not a second after. Until then, the war is still on. The absurdity of thought that thousands might still die between now and the hour peace is scheduled to begin is so staggering, no one can quite wrap their heads around it. It's like being told a bomb will go off at lunchtime, but you're still expected to sit and butter your bread until the clock strikes. There's still gunfire in the distance. It's faint, like a memory repeating itself, but it's real. You hear it while tightening your bootlaces, adjusting the strap on your helmet. You think, why am I still wearing this? You think, what if someone didn't get the memo? Hughes assembles the section for roll call just after 8. Everyone's present. Everyone looks like they haven't slept properly in a week, which is fair, because no one has. He gives the orders quietly. Hold the line. Patrol the trench. No retreat. No advancement. No slacking. Not until the guns stop, he says, and we'll know when they stop. McAllister has scrawled the end on the side of his helmet in chalk. You don't ask why, and he doesn't offer. Dixon's humming something under his breath. Auld Lang Syne, maybe, though he swears he's never heard of it. Reggie's got a fresh bandage on his leg and a nervous twitch he's trying to hide. Time stretches. You watch the second hand on Hughes's battered pocket watch crawl toward 10. Every tick feels louder than the last shell you heard. At 10:25, the Germans open for fire. A burst of machine gun chatter breaks through the hush, sharp and brutal. You hit the dirt instinctively, heart pounding. A few lads return fire even though they shouldn't, even though everyone knows what's about to happen. A shell lands about 30 yards down the line. Shrapnel whistles overhead. Someone screams. "Hold the line!" Hughes yells. "No retaliation. It's the final hour." The rage that swells in you is hard to name. Part of you wants to scream at the sky, at the war, at whoever made the rules that said peace couldn't start just a little earlier. That dying at 10:59 counts, but 1100 means survival. Who decided that? Who measured a man's life in minutes? But then just before 11 it stops. One last shell, one final rifle shot, then nothing. No whistle, no announcement, just silence. And this time it stays. Not the tense, trembling silence of waiting. Not the ghost hush that follows shellfire. This is different. This is the absence of war. You stand slowly, unsure if it's a trick. You scan the trench. Men are rising one by one. No one speaks. Not at first. Dixon is staring across no man's land, his jaw slack. Reggie leans heavily on his rifle, eyes wide. McAllister lights a cigarette with shaking hands. The match flares, bright and brief. From the German side, someone cheers, a single voice high and thin, then others join in, they shout, they laugh. You haven't heard laughter from the other side in months. Then it spreads to your own lines. A ripple of disbelief, of giddy confusion. Men crying, men laughing, men standing in open air with their arms stretched like they're welcoming the sun for the first time. You sit down in the mud, let it soak into your trousers. You don't care, you just breathe. Historical fact, the Armistice of Compiègne went into effect at 11 a.m. on November 11th, 1918. The ceasefire was signed early that morning in a railcar in the forest of Compiègne, but fighting continued right up until the final minute. The last known soldier to die in combat was Private Henry Gunther, an American killed at 10:59 a.m. by machine gun fire. His charge had no tactical value. He was told to stop. He didn't. Fringe fact, some soldiers on both sides didn't believe the war had ended. They thought it was a ruse, a trick. Reports came in of soldiers refusing to leave their dugouts until hours later, too afraid to poke their heads up. Others wandered into no man's land in a daze, waiting to be shot, but no shots came. There's still debate over the final offensives, whether they were necessary, whether they were driven by pride, politics, or the sheer inertia of war. But for you in this moment, it doesn't matter. You're alive, you live to hear the silence, you climb out of the trench, rifle slung across your back, not needed for the first time since you arrived here. The air smells of wet earth and something else. Hope? Maybe. Or maybe it's just the absence of rot. You walk toward the wire and see the Germans doing the same. No rifles, no helmets, just men, in grey and brown, meeting in the middle like it's Christmas all over again. One of them waves, you wave back. You don't know what happens next. No one does. But for the first time in a long time, you believe there is a next. You come home on a train. Not the one you imagined, all brass band and waving flags, children chasing alongside, women dropping flowers into your lap. This one rattles and moans, built for freight before it was repurposed for soldiers. The windows are fogged, the seats hard, the air stale with sweat and pipe smoke. No one speaks much. There's too much between you all, shared trauma, sure, but also silence, guilt, grief, and that nagging feeling that the war might be over, but it isn't done. Your uniform's been cleaned, or it's at least hosed off. You still smell the trenches, though, like it's baked into your skin. Some of the lads disembarking at earlier stations smile and wave as they meet their families. Others just step off and vanish into the crowd, swallowed by normal life like they were never in it. You watch them with a strange ache in your chest. When your stop comes, it's nearly dusk. The station is smaller than you remember. Everything feels smaller. The platform, the buildings, the air itself. You step off slowly, kit bags slung over your shoulder. A few people are waiting, not many. A woman with a basket of bread. A man in a suit with a sign that reads "Welcome home, Charlie." A little girl holding a puppy and looking confused by all the noise. You look for your sister. You'd written ahead, told her the date, the train, said you were fine, said you'd shaved and everything. You haven't. Not really. But she said she'd be there. And she is. At the edge of the platform, hat pulled low, scarf wrapped around her neck like she's trying to disappear into it. When she sees you, her mouth opens, then shuts again. She doesn't run to you, she just walks, carefully, eyes never leaving yours. You drop your bag, she hugs you. You don't hug back right away. Your arms feel uncertain, like they don't know what they're supposed to do anymore. But then you do. You wrap them around her, and hold her like she's a life raft and you're still treading water somewhere outside Ypres. She pulls back and says your name like it's a question. You nod. Yes, it's me, mostly. The walk home is quiet. She talks a little, about the town, the baker, who got married, who didn't. You listen, nod when it feels right. The houses are the same, the streets are the same. The world kept turning while you were underground. Your old room is just like you left it. Posters on the wall, a cracked mirror, the bed with its too thin mattress and too soft pillow. You sit on the edge and stare at your boots. You don't want to take them off. Something about removing them feels too final, or you'll forget how to fight or how to survive. That night you dream you're still in the trench. The walls are soft and breathing. The rats talk. They tell you the war isn't over. You wake with a shout, fists clenched, body slick with sweat. Your sister stands in the doorway, not saying anything. "I'm fine," you lie. She nods. She's good at lying too. The next day you walk into town, some folks wave, some avoid your eyes. A few come up to shake your hand like you've won a prize. You don't remember their names, you nod anyway. The mayor gives a speech, something about courage, duty, honour. You smile politely and imagine how he'd look covered in lice and biscuit crumbs sobbing in a dugout. You meet other lads from the front. Some look better, some worse. One's missing an eye. Another keeps blinking like he's waiting for something to explode. You trade awkward laughs, half memories. You don't talk about the bad parts, not yet. You hear from Dixon, a letter scrawled and smudged. He made it back to Yorkshire. Says he's working at his uncle's garage. McAllister's joined a travelling theatre group. Of course he has. Reggie's in hospital, still learning to walk again. You read the letter twice, then tuck it away with the others in a box under your bed. Historical fact. Thousands of returning WI soldiers suffered from what was then called shell shock, now recognised as PTSD. Many couldn't return to normal life. Some ended up institutionalised. Others drank, drifted, disappeared. Governments weren't prepared to help. Veterans' benefits were inconsistent. Support systems? Almost non-existent. Fringe fact. One group of British veterans formed a secret club called the Order of the Trench Rat. No officers allowed, no politics, just shared understanding. They met in basements, pubs, parks. Sometimes they didn't speak at all, just sat in silence and let each other exist. Historians still argue whether WWI ever truly ended for those who fought it. Sure, the fighting stopped, treaties were signed, parades held, but peace isn't a date on a calendar. For some, it never arrived. Not in their sleep, not in their bones, not even in death. You sit by the window at night and listen to the quiet. It still feels strange, like something's missing, like someone pressed pause and forgot to hit play again. You keep your rifle locked in a chest at the foot of your bed, just in case. Not because you expect another war, but because it's the only thing that still feels real in your hands. Some mornings you wake before dawn and go walking, just you, the sky, and the echo of boots on wet cobblestone. You don't talk much these days, but when your sister asks if you're all right, you always say the same thing. I'm here. And for now, that's enough. You're lying in your bed now, the same one you left behind when the war was still a word in the newspaper, not a memory stitched into your skin. The ceiling's different, clean, whole, no cracks leaking rain or dirt. You can hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Not a bomb, not a whistle, just time moving forward. Outside, the street lamps flicker. Somewhere a dog barks. Somewhere else, someone laughs. You lie there, staring at the dark, letting the silence fold over you like a second blanket. Your boots are by the door, muddy from your walk. You didn't clean them, couldn't. Something about scrubbing them down feels like erasing proof that you were there at all. That it happened, that it mattered. You breathe in, count 4, hold, count 4, let go. A trick Reggie taught you when he couldn't sleep, when the pain in his leg flared so bad he cried without sound. You still do it sometimes, helps. On the table beside you is a letter. It's from Dixon. He writes like nothing happened, full of jokes and updates about the garage, as if the two of you didn't once lie side by side waiting for death together. You smile anyway, because that's how you hold on. You don't know what comes next. Maybe peace lasts, maybe it doesn't. Maybe the world forgets what you saw, or maybe it builds statues and sings songs and tells only the parts that are easy to swallow. But you'll remember. And if anyone ever asks, really asks, you'll tell them. Not with medals, not with speeches, but with truth. Just a quiet voice in the dark saying, "This is what it was like, and I survived."